So I think kind of my mantra since the bill passed the House and the Senate, and I'm sure folks in our office are tired of me saying this, is that the bill has not yet been signed by the governor. And so just to kind of set that as a very clear expectation, I don't think we're calling that into question, but I just want folks to be aware that once the bill is signed, it is not effective until 91 days after sine die. So I expect that the bill will be signed, and then it will not be actually effective until October 6th. And we've counted the days on the calendar a number of times, so we're very clear that that's the actual date. So in some of the documents that we'll kind of go through in a few minutes, you'll see that that's kind of where our starting point is. Taking that into consideration, and despite, my, slight heart palpitations when Senate and committee appointments came out and the Joint Committee was not listed on there, they did that on purpose, also because the bill is not into effect until October. So the legislature will be convening in September for interim days. We do not expect to hear anything from the Joint Committee since they're not appointed. It's yet to be determined whether or not the transportation committees will want to hear something. My guess is not, but that's kind of on the back burner still, trying to figure that out. So then the committee will be appointed in October, and then I expect to have them convene during November interim days, and then probably again in January, and then obviously leading into the February session. So that's kind of where we are at with the Joint Committee and kind of the overarching implementation piece. But as I'm sure you are aware, it's one of those gray areas right now because we don't want to go and then not go. We don't want to go too fast. We don't want to go too slow. We don't want to be asked for an update on where we're at in November and not have anything to report back on, especially given some of the large expectations that are coming forward in February for us. So you'll also notice, and I think there's been conversations that what we are teeing up at this particular moment in time is anything that we can leading up to that go live date, for lack of a better term, to make sure that everything is teed up, but nothing is at a point where it could not be pulled back if needed. So we're paying very close attention to that as well. So once the bill did pass, one of the things that we realized pretty early on is that we needed a project manager to kind of help us with the implementation, to help guide the ship. And the way that I've been kind of talking about this, right, wrong, or indifferent, is that we have a very large bill that has a lot of black and white requirements in it. There are still some gray areas around, legislative intent, around conversations that transpired at the beginning of the conversation that may not have been codified at the end of the conversation. And so really kind of making sure that there is the appropriate political lens as we're moving forward with implementation, and making sure that nothing is falling through the cracks, that we have clearly identified timelines, because it's not just a report due February 1st, it's all of the legwork leading up to that. It's making sure that we have appropriately identified the leads on particular elements within the bill, making sure that we have roles and responsibilities clearly identified, making sure that divisions are working cross-divisionally together. And not that I don't think any of this wouldn't happen otherwise, but just being able for us to have a centralized location where we can kind of see, the start to finish kind of components, and then be able to hone in on details as we need to. So since there's been a void of a project manager, and I think as was mentioned a bit ago, I've chatted with I think 14 people as of late to make sure that we have the right fit kind of helping with this. But because we don't have anybody, it's given me the opportunity to play with a number of tools, and I have no project management background other than watching them be done successfully. But one of the documents that you have in front of you is this handy dandy ginormous chart. And what we've done is tried to really piece out the high-level components of implementation over the next 6 months. So I feel like that's one leg of our charge. And we've identified responsible parties. The blue square kind of identifies when the due date is for each of these items. And kind of tried to work things backwards just a little bit so that we could make sure that everything that's appropriately needing to be done is plugged in here. The other elements that are reflected on this sheet are items that we also got money for. As a result of House Bill 2017, they ran the budget separately through House Bill 5045, but they did give us startup money, if you will, to kind of make sure that we did have resources to move forward with the charge over the next 6 months. So the elements that we did get funding for are also in here. If you're paying very close attention, you'll note that there's one element in here that's not due until 2023 that we got funding for. I'm not quite sure why, but that's also reflected in here, but it's a little bit of a one-off on there. So this, at this particular moment, is kind of our starting document. I expect this to morph significantly as we look at implementation over both this biennium and next biennium. The second piece of our charge at this point in time that I see as a significant lift is also the fact that because we only got funding for the first 6 months, we will be going back to the legislature in February asking for the remainder of the fiscal that we need to make sure that this is implemented effectively. And so my team in government relations right now is working with divisions to make sure that the numbers that we had estimated at the end of the 17 session are really dusted off, and appropriate fiscals and FTE requests that we will bring forward for this biennium and next. We'll be working internally to make sure that we have scrubbed those and make sure that we have the right levels, the right people, the right kind of execution on this, looking a little bit more long-term. We're still waiting on details on kind of timeline around that. I'm sure we will be having another conversation about what that looks like. My expectation is that we'll need to have final numbers scrubbed by late fall to make sure that we're in time for the budget conversations that tee themselves up fairly early for the February session. So that's kind of where we're at with the fiscal piece right now. One other thing that I will kind of note, and I think that this work will also be folded into whatever project document we end up utilizing, is our work with external entities. And for us right now, that's kind of twofold. We've met with AOC and LOC. We will continue to do that. We're working on the roles and responsibilities, both in the short and long term, to make sure that, you know, neither leg of the three-legged stool is wobbly, so that we're all moving forward, especially given some of the triggers that are put in place in the bill to make sure that we're all kind of moving forward unified on a number of elements. So we are working through that. And one other piece that I just thought I'd mention is that we are also working very, very closely with our sister agencies on this implementation. It's not just ODOT going out and making sure that we are doing this appropriately. Department of Revenue, as an example, has a number of components that are make or break in this to make sure that we are working with them in lockstep to deliver. So they're giving us the new taxes, and then we're spending them right. But if that delivery doesn't happen, so we continue to work on that relationship with them, as well as with DEQ and a number of the other agencies that are impacted by this. So we've still got a big lift ahead of us, but I will say, just from my personal perspective, that it's a really exciting thing to be working on implementing. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So, not to put you on the spot, but I will.
Okay.
And you can put him on the spot if you'd like. What keeps you awake? What do you worry about the most on getting done?
I think I'll answer that twofold. The thing that keeps me awake is what I had mentioned earlier about legislative intent. I think that things were moving so quickly that there may be some components of this that people think should be executed in such a manner that may not be how we're reading it. And so what keeps me up is misfiring and having that done down the road. So I think for me, what I'm trying to kind of assess as soon as the joint committee is established is really kind of that dialogue back and forth and information loop to make sure that if there are ambiguities in this, that we're correcting them, even if we need a legislative fix to do that.
And I appreciate that. And I think one of the things that we can do to help you is that link not only with the not yet stood up joint committee, but with legislators. And I think we've been craving that. And that's something as commissioners, if there is something that we can do to help you, help Director Garrett, and make sure that we identify those misfires ahead of time. You don't want a hot gun sitting next to you. So if we can help you with that as you go through, and I really, really appreciate all that you've done, not just for us, but for the agency on trying to uncover and identify all of those items that could be misintent, because we don't want that. And I don't think the legislatures want that either. I think they would love to have put it all in, but you're right. We meant to do it this way, and we already know some of those are coming.
Right.
So Leah, thank you very, very much for all that you've done.
Thank you.
First of all, thank you, and I don't know if this is put Carmen on the spot, but what's the timeline in which the governor has to sign the legislation?
Fine, fair question, tomorrow. Tomorrow's the last day and the governor will sign the bill tomorrow.
And might the governor have given any indication to you on her intent?
It is my expectation she will sign the bill.
And does the governor have any, could she exercise any line item veto authority on this legislation?
I don't know on this particular, I think that's only for the
Revenue.
appropriations,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay, thank you.
I'm sure you're thinking about this too, but I'm a little worried about mismatched expectations, not just among legislators and the department, but also among our local partners in the department, because I think a lot of them had and have some very high hopes and are reading things into the bill, into the deliberations in the legislature that didn't end up really in the bill. And so that's, I think that's going to be a challenge to manage as well.
And maybe that's a good opportunity for us to have a conversation with the ACT chairs and with folks in October to go through some of those pieces, kind of our take on how especially the Connect process will unfold. And I know there's a lot of angst about what that means. And if we are all sharing the same information, I think that will definitely benefit all of us. I appreciate you raising that. Please.
No, Madam Chair, we're on the front end of this, right? So I think it's pretty easy for us to be aligned going forward, right? They're going to have the joint committee. I think it's an opportunity for us to communicate with them on a regular basis, to have them before the commission as we begin to implement and execute the new law. So, I mean, I think on the front end, we have an opportunity to improve the connectivity between both where the governor wants to go, but also where the legislative intent going forward. And I don't know if there's an opportunity to include anyone there at the workshop to clarify some of that ambiguity on the letter of the law versus the legislative intent. But I think it's our intent to move forward in good faith and to execute as written and to try to clarify the intentions there moving forward. And I think to figure out when there's some conflict or some friction between legislative intent and how it's drafted, that we come up with workable solutions with kind of eyes wide open. But
I think that's an important piece.
yeah, I think we're at the front end of it, right? So that's the good news is we have, it's wide open for us to work together with those who drafted this and clearly have ownership in the changes. in how they affect ODOT and how they affect the commission, in particular, the new authorities and oversight given to the commission that they felt very strongly about, going back to the management review and what new transparencies were put in. But, I mean, the onus is on us to make sure that we're connected and having clear vision on what the intent is as well as the letter of the law.
I wholeheartedly agree. I wonder, Director Garrett, if we could talk offline in between now and the next meeting and see if there's a way for us to put that into the workshop as well. I think that would be great, because I think it really is setting the pace. And I think also getting from them, what are their expectations, and where there were some questions in terms of the lines from the committee and the OTC and who has authority where. So I think it definitely would behoove us to start out very strong and understanding where those clear lines are, and so that we don't have questions down the road. Okay.
And then
Yes, please.
maybe you can sleep.
That'd be nice.
You have been amazing, and just couldn't be more proud to work with you. I heard time and again about the responsiveness, the level of detail, the commitment to just getting things right. Thank you to you and your team for shepherding all of this forward, and really proud to work with you, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next item on the agenda, we have a discussion about the charge and approval to form a value pricing policy advisory committee. Mr. Brower, turn it over to you. And in your packet, we do have a draft charge as well as the outline for the policy advisory committee.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, for the record, I'm Travis Brower, ODOT's Assistant Director. And before we start, I have one important announcement. There was a white Ford Fusion outside, sedan, license plate E256524. Emily Nascimento has been texting me about every 15 seconds. They've asked us to move it 3 times, and so I think they're at the point where they may take some action on us here.
Does it have state plates on it?
It is, in fact, an E plate is a state plate, so. I think we found the owner. Okay. Excellent. All right, Emily, you see I did that? Thank you. The value pricing implementation is going to be one of the most interesting portions of the implementation of HB 2017, and potentially one of the most far-reaching and transformative. A little bit of background on value pricing. We had a discussion a couple months ago when Cambridge Systematics came in and gave you an overview of congestion pricing that sort of touched the high level of what this means and what the implications are. And we've shared a background paper that they had put together. We've done a number of little policy implementation or policy review work over a number of years, but this is a fairly recent conversation with this commission. I think Commissioner Lohman is probably the only one who was really around about half a decade ago when we really did in-depth work on that leading up to the I-5 Columbia River Crossing project. Value pricing is synonymous with congestion pricing, and it is essentially an effort to use price signals through tolling to manage demand on the transportation system. Typically, it means that you're charging a higher price for use of a road or a portion of a road, perhaps just a lane, when demand is greater, usually in the evening or morning rush hours. The goal is really to reduce congestion, make more efficient use of the transportation system we have by encouraging people to travel at less congested times, or to provide a more reliable travel time for those who choose to pay. Value pricing, there's a number of different applications. For example, one of the most common is converting an existing carpool lane, a diamond lane, a high occupancy vehicle lane, to a high occupancy toll lane in which non-carpoolers can choose to pay a fee to use the lane to save time or have a more reliable trip. That's been done extensively across the country, and Washington has 2 of these hot lanes that they have put into place to great effect. There are also congestion pricing applications that involve putting a variable toll on a new highway lane that can be called an express toll lane. It's very similar to a hot lane. Another very common method, and this is what we propose for the I-5 Columbia River Crossing, is using tolls on bridges that vary by time of day. So for example, with the I-5 Columbia River Crossing, that was going to be tolled around the clock, and yet there was going to be essentially a surcharge at peak hours to try to encourage people to drive at less congested times of the day. Another application that has not been used in the United States, but which has been used in a number of European and Asian cities, is cordon pricing, where you essentially draw a ring around a central business district and charge for most routes into that area. This has been done in London, Singapore, Stockholm, and I think there was one other city in Sweden which have deployed this to great effect. All of these value pricing applications serve different goals. So, for example, variable bridge tolls can be used to shift traffic to less congested times of the day, or to finance existing or expanded highway capacity, like the Columbia River crossing would have done. Hot lanes generally do not necessarily manage demand or shift demand to non-peak periods as much, but they do provide a more reliable trip for those who wish to pay. Cordon pricing is one that is often used as a demand management tool, really to try to reduce the number of single occupancy vehicles on the road, shift demand to transit oftentimes. So really, those are the different outcomes you can facilitate or incentivize using value pricing. And what's interesting about this legislation is that it clearly defines that congestion relief is the goal, but it doesn't specifically direct the commission on how to go about that. So there's really a policy call for the commission in this legislation about what application you will choose and how that will facilitate congestion relief. The specific direction in the bill is that in order to manage congestion, under Section 120, you're required to develop a proposal for value pricing on Interstate 5 and Interstate 205 from the Columbia River to the junction of those two highways. You have to apply to the Federal Highway Administration for approval to implement value pricing no later than December 31st, 2018. And then if FHWA approves, you're directed to implement value pricing as they approve. So we are working on implementing this direction from the legislature on two fronts. The first is what I'm going to spend most of the time talking about today, is the value pricing feasibility analysis in the Portland metro region, where we're going to work with stakeholders to determine where to apply value pricing and what specific form of value pricing to apply. That's really going to be handled by Region 1 staff as essentially a regional transportation project. The second piece is really the policy and systems development work that will proceed apace with the feasibility analysis. This is going to be about how we collect the tolls. That will include developing plans for the on-highway lane systems, the customer service systems, the billing systems, that entire back office and the organizational structure by which ODOT implements this. Likely, we will have to stand up some sort of new unit within ODOT. That will be a toll unit. For example, Washington has a toll division within WashDOT. We'll make a determination through this process about how you would stand that up. Most likely, we will procure a significant amount of this service from the private sector, as there are already vendors who provide these lane systems and back office support and customer service support. So it will be almost a public-private partnership in that sense. That work on systems and policy will be led out of our Office of Innovation within the Director's Office, which also has authority over automated vehicles and road usage charging and other sort of innovative policy work. They'll be standing up that effort and then transferring it to a new unit within ODOT once that is stood up. But they're a good unit to do that policy development work. They'll be doing some policy, statewide policy work related to various aspects that we'll need to implement this. For example, we will likely need to update our toll enforcement statutes, as those were last updated in 2007. There's been a lot of technological change, a lot of understanding of how most effectively to enforce tolls. So we'll need to go through that process and determine if there's ways to go about doing that. There will also be other policy decisions that the Commission will need to weigh in on that the Office of Innovation will lead. So I'm going to spend most of my time today talking about the Value Pricing Policy Advisory Committee, which we're proposing as a stakeholder group that can help inform the Commission's decision-making on the actual transportation project side of this, where and what form of value pricing. Next month, it's likely that you may get a proposal that we'd like to put some additional investment into around the how, what sort of system we're going to build here. We're looking at the opportunity to build an open architecture tolling system that would be less beholden to a single technology, a more customer-centric, customer-friendly approach that you could bring multiple devices or multiple accounts. If you were in Oregon, Origo, you might be able to use your Origo account to pay your tolls, or you might be able to use your OnStar or on in car telematics or a transponder. So we're looking at that as an opportunity because unlike a lot of states that are legacy systems that have had tolling for decades, we're coming into this at a really interesting time for technology as cars become essentially mobile computers, and trying to leverage some of that opportunity as well. So we'll talk to you a little bit about that next month if we're seeing opportunities panning out with a request for information that we put on the street recently. So to focus
Quick
in,
question, a quick question. So Region 1, did I understand you correctly? They will be talking about whether it is feasible or not? And this is going to be more the implementation of options of the how?
Yes,
Okay.
that is correct, Chair
And
Manning.
so what level of interaction will we have? My concern is with Region 1, making sure, I don't know that the question is, should we, it's can we? And so how do we make sure that we are guiding that in a direction that, just knowing that this is a very politically charged, challenging discussion for a number of individuals. So I'm just wondering what that looks like.
Yeah, Chair Boehning, that's a really good question. I think it's really important for the commission's fingerprints to be all over this. And that's why with this Policy Advisory Committee, we are requesting that we have a member of the commission serve on this and help direct that regular activity of this group. We would also expect that this is going to be an item you will probably see on your agenda more often than you would like. We anticipate monthly updates through the fall, and I believe that document we handed out as part of the lunch packet lists regular updates once this Policy Advisory Committee gets up and running. That you'll probably have that on either monthly or every couple of months, so that you can be informed, provide feedback, and provide any direction, and really to help your decision making in the long term. We anticipate that this work for the Policy Advisory Committee will take much of the next year. And that there will be at some point in the spring or summer of next year a recommendation coming to the commission or input coming to the commission for you then to make some decisions so that we can prepare that application to FHWA. So you will get plenty of opportunity to be engaged in this one, as this is again one of the when Commissioner Brown asked Leah the question, "What keeps you up at night?" This is certainly one that may not facilitate me sleeping deeply over the next year or two.
Just a quick question, and I realize this is tied to two specific corridors within Region 1.
Yep.
And because I see this maybe moving further south one of these days, could we title this, instead of just value pricing implementation, can we be a little more specific? Value pricing on I-5 and the 205 corridor within, and I say that only because we might want to change it later on.
Okay.
And if we have an all-encompassing value pricing, it's gonna be harder to change. Is that something that I'm being a little too specific on? And I asked fellow commissioners to weigh in, and just because I think, we're doing this, and it's kind of a, let's see if it works. And we're picking two specific places. So I'd like the Policy Advisory Committee and this tolling to be specific. Thoughts?
My only hesitation would be that we develop something that only works in one area. So long as whatever it is that we decide are options, we're not creating a challenge down the future to replicate. So that,
And I think that we're saying the same thing,
Excellent.
just in a different way.
okay. So thoughts?
But just to clarify, the legislation highlights specific areas where we are to look to implement value pricing.
We are to be very focused.
Right, so it's
correct.
not, it doesn't give us, it doesn't say we can't have a statewide lens,
Right.
but it does charge us to look at a very specific application.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that's correct. The legislation, Commissioner Holleran, specifically directs you to look at I-5 and I-205, but is permissive relating to value pricing anywhere else in the state. For the record, this is direction from the legislature. You already have statutory authority in ORS 383 to undertake tolling of the transportation system. And so this is consistent with that direction, just provides you a little bit of a push into making use of that existing statutory direction.
And a timeline that we need to meet as well. Please.
Thanks, Travis. I was when I was reading through this, and obviously, as was it was just identified 205 as one of those corridors which we would be looking into. As it's funny, on my flight over, I was reading a report on just the income disparities in the Portland metro region and how the heavily concentrated populations of color that are living on incomes less than like 30,000 are heavily concentrated in East Portland, which 205 obviously runs adjacent to. So I was just, when I was looking through the attachment that was describing the membership, and one of the bullet points advocates for equity and environmental justice, but then it has another bullet that indicates environmental advocacy groups. So it's almost redundant from the environmental side there. But then also, to be more specific, if we could target one of those bullet points around equity and make it more socially equity focused, which would look at, more broadly as representatives and advocates from those communities that make up, human health impacts as it relates to transportation systems and then diversity and obviously low-income populations. I think that conversation brought to the table for that advisory group will be very important as we look at this program, because in all honesty, I mean, we want to build support for what we're doing broadly amongst the taxpayers as opposed to resentment. And yeah, and then obviously the list that you have identified here of individuals, I think there would definitely need to be more outreach to people of color that could actually take up some of these positions on this committee.
Good points, Commissioner Simpson. And certainly the bullet point around equity and environmental justice is to try to get at that issue around low-income communities, communities of color. Environmental advocacy groups and environmental justice are slightly different in the sense environmental justice has a very specific meaning within the transportation universe, and it really is focused on the environmental impacts on low-income communities and communities of color. The environmental advocacy groups are brought to the table because many of them have desire to use tolling as a device to try to incentivize more public transportation use, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and reduce single occupancy vehicle use. So there is a distinction there. But certainly I will provide that feedback to our Region 1 staff to ensure that as they look at membership, we work to get communities of color included directly in this membership.
Great.
And I think the piece of social justice also is a terminology that would be important to factor in. I do hear what you're saying about the environmental justice, but I think equally the social justice piece is a terminology that would capture a section of inclusion that maybe this wouldn't.
That was certainly the intent with equity and the specific use of environmental justice as the phrase of art within the transportation world as required by the Federal Highway Administration. So I think the equity and
okay.
environmental justice includes that
Okay.
within that specific terminology.
Okay.
But if not, certainly we will make
Well-
sure that that is.
And if it doesn't cause a problem, if we added it, better to be more inclusive of folks seeing where they fit in than to be expecting others to try to understand terminology from a transportation, federal highways perspective.
What I'd recommend then, upon the motion to approve this, approve it with the words social justice added after equity, perhaps.
Excellent, and we can keep the environmental justice, that
Yeah.
also assists us in the federal side.
Yeah,
but
we believe that
I
that is
think
going to be
Let's
necessary
keep
for
it.
the Federal Highway Administration to review and approve. any
Excellent, so
proposal.
we'll just add the social piece.
Yeah.
All right,
Excellent.
that's a suggestion that I'm underscoring.
Yeah, and then, so how often do we have committees that incorporate individuals or stakeholders from Washington?
Regularly.
Okay.
Yeah, most of our major project committees and work in the metro region attempts to have folks from both sides of the river. So for example, JPACT has, I believe, a voting member from the state of Washington. There's a bi-state coordination committee. Most of those metro regional committees have that. You may have seen that we received a letter from a member of Congress from Washington State who had concerns about the impacts of this on her constituents. And certainly since it's likely that Washington commuters may be paying these fees, we thought it would be wise at least to have some representation from the partners around both sides of the river around the table to be able to inform the discussion.
Great.
I'd just like to reiterate a couple of points I made at our last meeting. When we looked at this 6-8 years ago, I think we spent easily 2 years looking at tolling opportunities and what might be feasible. And we came up kind of dry. And now we have 16 months, not only to figure out what's feasible, but to actually have a true plan in place to submit to FHWA. That's a really tight time frame.
Yeah.
I won't be surprised if you don't sleep much for the next year. The other point is, I am assuming and hoping that as part of this discussion about what might be feasible, we are continuing to think about the road user fee concept. It may or may not kind of work in this particular sort of narrow two-corridor slice of things, but I would want to make sure we don't end up, in some sense, like some of the states back east who have a sort of a legacy tolling system that technology is bypassing. And I think we want to make sure that whatever we come up with is gonna fit easily with whatever comes next. And I continue to believe whatever comes next in terms of replacement for the gas tax is going to be a vehicle miles travel tax, and I think it's going to be coming at the federal level. Yeah, I would not want to have us go down one path, have the feds come down another path, and have us have to go back and reinvent our wheel.
Yeah. Commissioner Lohman, thank you for that input and direction. We do believe that in the long term, a road usage charge could be an excellent platform for congestion pricing in the sense that it allows essentially a non-tolled opportunity to send a price signal to people using the roads. When we originally tested the road usage charge back in 2006, 2007, we did a portion of the pilot as a congestion pricing pilot and found it had significant impacts on behavior. We just recently applied for a federal highway administration grant to test the possibility of using our Origo platform for location-based pricing, which could include both different varieties of congestion pricing or value pricing, as well as local option pricing. So you could, for example, look at drawing a circle or a line around the city of Portland and charging a surcharge based on the fact that they have a higher local gas tax, or charging a surcharge for using the local freeway network. So those are the things we're going to be exploring. We're not quite certain that we're going to be able to get there technologically within the time frame envisioned under HB 2017, but we want to keep that option open, and hence one of the reasons why we're looking to potentially use an open architecture tolling system as opposed to developing a more narrow collection method.
I would just say, the examples you gave are exactly why a VMT type tax is so promising. It has such great flexibility. You can do a lot of different things that and set the kinds of incentives that you're interested in pretty easily with that, as opposed to some other tools. So, I wish the legislation gave us a little more time to work through some of these other issues, because I'm afraid we'll end up having to land on something before we're really ready to land.
So what we're being asked to do today is to approve the membership of the advisory commission or committee as directed in the legislation. Is that correct?
Commissioner O'Halloran, you are asked essentially to approve this attachment 1 of this item, which is the purpose, membership categories, and charge from the commission to provide direction to this policy advisory committee. I'll note that this is actually not required under the legislation. This is a decision of the commission as to how to implement the legislation that we believe, as with most of our major efforts, whether it was CMAQ or the public transportation plan, we engage a policy advisory committee of some sort to work through these. So not required by the legislation, but up to the commission.
Okay, so we're not ahead of our skis here. So, and is it the director's call on who serves on the advisory committee?
Commissioner O'Halloran, typically we ask you to approve the membership categories, and then you give the authority to the director to actually appoint within those categories to a little bit of flexibility. That way, if you've said these are the names and then they're not available, we'd have to come back to you. as you can see, as Commissioner Lohman mentioned, getting this done on this time frame is a lickety-split work, hence why we're in front of you first thing in this process of implementation.
Right. So does, going forward, does the director have the ability to expand or to alter the composition of the committee?
Commissioner Holland, only within the membership categories approved by the commission unless the commission were to grant additional authority.
And could additional, for example, could another member of the commission also be on this committee?
Yes, Commissioner O'Halloran, we have noted that we would ask the Oregon Transportation Commission to supply a representative. That could mean one or more representatives, depending on the desire of the commission.
I would just encourage the director to also consider potentially adding Commissioner Simpson onto this, given his geographic jurisdiction, his interests, the constituency he represents, and his particular point of view. I think would be helpful. So I don't know what the process is going forward, but I would just say that I think it's something we should consider, should he be willing to play a role there, so.
Why don't we just be intentional?
Yeah.
Let's just put Alondo Simpson alongside your name.
Yep, great.
And let's just make the move right now.
Whether he wants to.
I apologize, maybe I should ask you if you're okay with it.
Hey, that's what you get for speaking up. I mean, this, I think, yeah, I think this will make you wish you had served on the CMAC committee.
I think that's great. And there have been a number of occasions where membership, Director Garrett we've gone over that, or what do you think of this, or is it giving you any heartburn? There's a good connection between memberships of committees and such with the director, with the OTC. We do have a letter in front of us as well, and I would like us to spend, because we have a lot of parties, stakeholders that have taken the time to submit their comments, I would like to make sure that as we look at the charge in particular and the considerations and factors on the back, that we feel that this has been included to the best of our agreement in terms of what it is that we are being asked to do. So with the letter and cross-referencing that with the information that is in your packet, are there adjustments or additions that you feel, or refinements that you feel that we should consider?
Do you feel like the interests that are articulated in this letter are represented in the composition of the committee?
Commissioner O'Halloran, yes. When Matt and I sat down and reviewed this letter when it came in yesterday, and we believe that both the points that they have articulated here are consistent with the charge that we're proposing to the commission, and that all of the organizations represented on this letter would have a seat at the table, whether it's the specific individual listed here or some representative. One of the things we're going to try to do is make sure that we have membership that matches up to some extent with our Area Commission on Transportation and with the Joint Policy Committee, Advisory Committee on Transportation, which is Metro's MPO committee, so that you have the right people who are part of those existing conversations going on around the table.
Do we anticipate that these meetings would allow for participation in terms of individuals, similar to CMAC, where they can come and that there would be a public comment period or those types of, so we will be best with the most information, and so folks having information that they feel that they need to convey. What type of a structure are you?
Yeah, Commissioner Maney, thank you for bringing that up. We anticipate, just to fill you in a little bit about the process, after the commission gives us direction here, we intend to launch a procurement to bring in a traffic and revenue analysis firm and a coalition of consulting firms that will help manage this process. So we likely will have a facilitator, much as you did for the CMAC conversation, and then we will need firm to do the analysis of the impacts and traffic and revenue as we have done for other projects. We would also expect to have a very robust public engagement component of this. These will be open meetings. We are likely to put this information out to the public in the very near future on the internet, creating email lists. We expect to do some public opinion research to understand what the public feels and have opening listening sessions as well on a number of occasions, because we believe it's really important to do this well and to do this successfully. It's going to require a very open, transparent, public process that the public can see that the decision-making has taken into account their input and that they can see the benefit of whatever proposal comes out of the backside of that.
My expectation. Thank you very much. Please.
Just with respect to this letter from the Portland metro area players, they've listed 5 principles. Principle number 4 has to do with a membership, and I think you've addressed that. The other 4 principles there seem to me to be sort of common sense, but I guess I want to make sure that it's clear to everyone that the advisory committee itself is going to decide what principles need to be embodied in this initiative. And certainly they would, I have no doubt they would include at least these, but there will probably be more.
Yeah, we're not deciding the policy today, we're deciding the committee. And I think
Exactly.
to your point,
Exactly.
and that's really all we have to do, and to give, and to have authority to make changes as we see fit. But I think that task is, we're gonna have a lot of time in between your sleepless nights to discuss what this looks like and where it might go and what the specifics of a recommendation out of this particular commission will look like. So we have a relatively simple task today, and I think we need not get caught up in the weeds on going beyond that and debating the policy, but just saying, hey, we've got a pretty good outline, a good structure of a committee. Let's give our stamp of approval and move forward. And I would say accordingly, Madam Chair, I would move to approve the formation of a value pricing policy advisory committee and to inform implementation of House Bill 2017 accordingly as described.
And I believe we do have a couple of amendments as well, and that would be adding the social justice piece. Were there any other amendments?
Commissioner Simpson being placed
Yes,
on
thank you.
the roster.
Thank you.
That Commissioner Simpson, that's so, given your willingness to serve in any capacity there. So I'm not trying to obligate you here, should you?
Yeah, you made me
Really?
very clear.
Okay, yes, I
I
am.
feel like
No,
you're
I'm honored.
overjoyed.
I'm
Yes,
honored.
okay, good.
I
All
would, I
right.
would appreciate it. I think it's vital that, as I was speaking with Carmen a little bit ago, that it's, as a department that is heavily dependent on public resources and taxes, that we justify very explicitly what is taking place with the public resources. And I want to make sure that we're as broad as we possibly can be, so that the public is very much secure and excited about the importance of the system, but also what the ROI is on their investment.
Absolutely. Excellent. Do we have other comments? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
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 Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. And I do want to say thank you to the folks out of the Metro Multnomah, Portland, Tri-Met area. I think their letter was beneficial, and, how we start this conversation will determine what we come up with. So I'm excited to see that we are very aligned. So next on our agenda, we have item C. We're going on to request for an amendment to the 2015-18 STIP. Mr. Mather, nice to see you.
Good to see you. Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Paul Mather, Highway Division Administrator, here asking your approval to amend the 15-18 statewide transportation improvement program to add 2 projects that were specifically named in the House Bill 2017. The 2 projects are I-205 Johnson Creek to Glen Jackson Bridge corridor bottleneck and the active transportation management project in the corridor. As I mentioned, these are both projects named specifically in the bill. The other factors with these two projects is they are both projects that need to be completed before January 1, 2020 to trigger the next 2 cents increase in gas tax. Normally, these projects would have been in the next agenda item as part of all the other projects named in the bill, but because of that special call-out in the bill and that trigger for that additional gas tax, we need to get started on both these projects right away to ensure that we meet that trigger. The bottleneck project that's outlined in here as part of our corridor bottleneck operation study, or otherwise we call CBOS. There's a number of auxiliary lanes that we've been in front of you and you've seen in our various steps to do that work. This was one of the last ones outlined in that study to add, to improve efficiencies, but basically an aux lane that you'll see from Powell to I-84 on 205. The active transportation traffic management project is similar to what we've done on 217 with the variable speed limit signs and the other information signs. So we'll be replicating that system onto I-205 to improve safety in the corridor, reduce congestion from crashes in the corridor, and just overall try to streamline the traffic flow and get just as much capacity as we can out of the existing system that we have. So with that, Madam Chair, I'd ask your approval to add both those projects to the 15-18 STIP.
Please.
And I think we talked about this, Paul. These are two separate projects. And the total of the two is 30 million. Okay, so, and the only thing that, just to clarify, it is two separate projects with a total of $30 million.
Correct.
And it doesn't combine.
That's correct, and I wouldn't read anything into our delivery strategy by doing that. These will likely be two separate projects. In fact, the bottleneck project, our plans are to incorporate that with a paving project we already have in the current STIP to leverage the efficiencies with doing that and minimize impact on traffic.
And everything we do today, giving you the approvals, if the bill is not signed, you can pull this back.
That's correct.
And the $3 million of other in 2018, you know how much I love other.
Yeah.
My assumption is right away, and I didn't ask you this before, my apologies.
Yeah, so I'm trying to think.
So you've got design in 2017 of 8 million, you've got 3 million in other for 2018, and then the remainder for construction beyond that. And I don't need an answer
Yeah,
today.
see, I got a pretty good guess, but I'd be guessing
Yeah,
at this
and
point
that's-
exactly what that is, so I'd rather wait.
If you can help me in the
Yeah,
future with other,
yep,
I mean,
yep.
I like $3 million myself and would love to have
Yep.
$3 million of other, but let's do a
Yep,
better job with
yep,
that.
yep.
But I do appreciate bringing this forward now with the contingency that we can pull back if this is not signed.
That's correct.
So Paul, what is the contingency number for this project, or is there not one budgeted in?
Each of our projects have built into their cost estimates contingencies based on their development of
Is it
design.
10%?
I'd have to go back and look at the specific estimate, but they are as high as 40% if we're early on in the design and scoping. We call it contingency, but at that stage, it's really a kind of a miscellaneous and contingency. So when we put together estimates, we will put together estimates on kind of the major features that we know about, the bridges, the pavements, the stuff that's easy to do calculations on. But every inlet, every sign, every illumination, we don't do estimates on that and kind of throw that into what we call contingencies, but it's really kind of a miscellaneous factor. But as we go through design, you'll see that contingency go from 40%. When we get to construction, it'll be at about 3%. And so we'll put more specificity to our design, and then we know how many luminaires we have, we know how much curb we have to do, and that'll come into the other side of the equation, into the kind of the hard side of the estimate. And that contingency number will be a true contingency of about 3.5% that we have in all our construction projects.
Do you have any concerns about meeting the deadline or operating within these dollar amounts to be able to get to project completion?
At this point, I don't have any concerns with the dollar amounts or the timelines, but
Okay.
they will both be challenging for us. And why I'm here today asking you to give us as much lead time and work as we move forward on these projects to ensure as much contingency on our timelines as possible to make sure we hit those dates because of the importance.
Okay, excellent, thank you. Please.
No, I just think that we should, I mean, I don't know if there's any more debate, but and if not, I would move forward that we approve to amend the 2015-2018 statewide transportation improvement program to add the Interstate 205 Johnson Creek to Glen Jackson Bridge Corridor bottleneck and active traffic management project in Multnomah and Clackamas counties, contingent upon the governor's signature of HB 2017.
Excellent. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Thank you very much. Next, more STIP. 2018-21. Paul, please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, Paul Mather, Highway Division Administrator. So this is the, kind of the balance of the projects. We pulled out the two in the previous agenda item. I will also note in the consent calendar, there is another project that will be funded with these additional House Bill 2017 funds combined with an existing project we have. But we're asking you in the consent calendar to approve that project on 84 in the grant to do that pavement work, to accelerate that to match to an existing project we have and to match into our delivery plans for this summer to get as much work as we can out as early as we can with the project. So without those two exceptions that you'll see on the agenda, the one I just talked about on 205, and then that one that you'll see in the consent calendar later on in the agenda. With those two exceptions, what I have in front of you is the list of projects I would request your approval to go out for public review of the list of projects in this agenda item for me to come back the next month to ask your approval. Also, let me talk a little bit about the list and then a little bit about its importance from that timeline that I just mentioned. So this list includes three kind of general categories that I outlined in the letter. The first is what I call the named projects in the bill. Projects that are specified that we have to do. And you'll notice in the list, as I broke those out, the first set there are on a state system, and you will see those listed in the STIP. The next set of projects are labeled as local projects. Those are coming out of the state side of the equation, but they're on the local system. Won't actually be in the STIP amendment that we will come back to you with. We'll end up writing intergovernmental agreements with those agencies and transfer those funds. Similar to the rest area funds that are listed in there, again, won't be in the STIP, but those are things named in the bill, and we will write an interagency agreement and get those funds transferred. So I put those kind of local projects in there just to be complete with the named projects in the bill. The other named projects that aren't on this list are the Connect projects. Those few projects that were part of the Connect program aren't listed in here, but the rest of those just to be complete and kind of show you where they fall. The next set of projects are the projects out of Section 71 of the bill, where we take the remaining funds generated by the increases in funding and apply those to our bridge program, our seismic program, so forth. I got those broken down into various categories of where they lie. Fortunately, as you know, last month you approved the 1821 STIP. And so that data that we had and that process that we had, our 150% list, were all very fresh, and we're able to use that data, that process we used to really just extend into this amendment to the 1821 STIP to expand it to include these projects. Many of the projects that you approved last month, some projects, not many projects, some projects you approved last month in 1821, we're actually going to be accelerating the schedules of and kind of filling in for 18. We're very conscious that we've got to have some velocity in projects and CM projects out on the ground for next summer. Many of those will be populated by just advancing projects already approved in the STIP. Since we already have your approval for those, we can start working on those and resourcing those to get those ready for next summer. This list of projects, you will see there's not many allocated for 18 in here, but they will be kind of backfilling behind those projects, filling up the voids that those other projects will create in the 19, 20, and 21 time frame for those projects. The last general category that's in here are the FAST Act funds that were left unallocated to projects as you went through the allocation for FAST Act funds. As you remember, there was $49 million in freight funds that weren't allocated, and we needed to wait till actually an agenda item in November that you will see to complete the planning process before we can formally put those in the STIP. But there's projects that we have in here lined up for that, as well as there was $25 million in strategic funds that the commission did not allocate. Through the development of House Bill 2017, those funds were put on the table. And part of, again, the velocity of getting projects ready and projects going out, those funds were allocated to various projects on this list, and in fact, some of the named projects. In fact, the projects that were in the previous agenda item will actually be funded with some of those freight funds out of the FAST Act funds. There wasn't actual funding in the bill that was allocated, generated for those projects. Anyway, my point is that this list that you have in front of you, it's got named projects in it, it's got the Section 71 projects, and then the $74 million with the freight and strategic funds that I spoke about. It's all kind of bundled together in the negotiations for the House Bill 2017 to create the list that you have in front of you. And I did the best I could to kind of break those out so you could see the various components of that when the list comes together, but the funding is very much kind of integrated between those. The importance of this list from a delivery standpoint, us internally, it's a critical step for us to know what these projects are so we can get resourcing strategies. Our staffing requests that we will have in front of the legislature in the 18 session is going to be key on the exact projects where they are and justifying the amount of positions and other resources we need to deliver the projects. We're assuming, just a little background on delivery, we're assuming that 70% of the design work in our STIP will be done through an outsourcing model. So we have fluctuated from as low as 30% to as high as 70% during the peak of the bridge program and the OTIA 3 program. Currently, before 2017, House Bill 2017, we're about 50% of our work is design. So this will push us again to that upper limit of, I think, what's prudent from an outsourcing standpoint to that 70% outsourcing. So there's a lot of work we're doing already behind the scenes to streamline our procurement processes and work with ACC and other partners to ensure that we have the resources both on the ODOT side as well as the consultant side to deliver these projects. But these particular projects, when they're scheduled, the nature of the projects, where they are, that level of detail is kind of the next piece that we need to integrate into our delivery strategies to ensure that we meet the intent of delivering these projects. So with that, I'll take questions. Again, I'm not asking for approval of this today. I'm just asking to release these for public review and come back to you in September and ask for approval.
In terms of public outreach, what do you anticipate, and would that also include our local governments and et cetera? So in terms of what type of process we intend to use?
The main piece of the outreach will be just the release that we have today of that and our commission agenda and packet. We will be sharing these with our area commissions on transportation around the state. We do have a legislation days that will happen between now and our next meeting in September, so we'll have an opportunity to engage legislators before the list is approved.
Excellent, thank you. Please.
Well, this is a daunting list of projects for you to deliver. I'm sure you're going to be sleeping as little as Travis over the next couple of years. And as we're ramping up to do 70% of this work by outsourcing, I'm assuming, and tell me if I'm wrong about that part of what we're going to come back to the legislature to ask for in February is the resources to be able to oversee those outsourcing work.
Right.
So we don't end up just having to trust entirely.
Yes, that's correct. There's project management responsibilities, QA/QC responsibilities we have to ensure the projects are built in a proper manner. We need the resources to be able to do that, as well as there's owner responsibilities that we have in making decisions that you really can't outsource on decisions on any project. So all of us have had contractors in our house maybe doing work, and you've got to make a decision as owner, do you want this color or that color of things, or do you want to approach it this way and the cost, so forth. So there's that owner responsibility that I think is key, that we can't outsource that we've got to have a role there, as well as just ensuring back to legislators and you and others that we've got quality projects out there.
So real quick, you talked about putting this back out to the acts. My assumption, I hope, is that that's a confirmation of what you've already heard in building this list.
Typically, in our kind of the fix-it side of our list, we, it's an informational to acts. We don't ask acts to approve that, but we share that with them in an informational standpoint. Also looking for opportunities to leverage different projects that we may have on the enhanced side or the fix-it side. So this won't be an approval to acts, it'll be an informational item for them, but also just to give we'll be looking for feedback when we do that of, oh, we may have missed something, of, hey, that bridge is right in the middle of another issue. It's best to delay that one or accelerate that one, those type of things that we'll try to kind of flesh out as we share and communicate with the list. But the actual approval of the list for the Fix-It program is with the commission.
Okay, and the other question that I had is, it seems like there's a lot of improvements to rest areas, and that's a great thing. We've needed that for years and years. But that also, again, I haven't done this for a while, seems unusual. Is that because we focused on that intentionally this time around?
Certainly the legislature did. It was a priority for them. As we look at, transportation professionals, we look at our system, we see bridges failing, pavements failing, rest areas failing, and we try to prioritize and having, various parts of our system failing. And yes, we've underinvested in rest areas just as we have in pavements and bridges and other aspects. Probably because we are focused on the transportation infrastructure and the importance of carrying freight, we've probably skewed more on the side of bridges and pavements than we have on rest areas. And the legislature has a policy decision here that they want to invest more in rest areas than what we may have traditionally invested in rest areas. The other, you remind me of just your comment you made on your on the last agenda item. This list also, while the bill won't be effective until October, if there isn't anything, if things come up or change between now and October, there isn't anything in here we couldn't, undo.
Yeah, this one I'm not
with
quite
your-
as
with
worried
your-
about since
okay.
it's 2018, but
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
thank you.
So benefit cost on 15 million and over, is that something that is factored in on these as well?
I know the answer to that. Help me.
Is that,
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So, but there
Okay.
are, yes, so it's,
I learn new things every time I read the bill.
yeah, so it is
So
focused
I'm-
on a capacity, but there is a nuance that we discovered in when we were dealing with this that we're gonna have to, as we develop the, you get my steps wrong, the 21, 24 step. There are gonna be some triggers of some of even our fix-it projects that will have a lane or something added to them that could trigger that congestion thing,
Okay.
even though that's not the intent of the project, but that we build our bridges or we build our fix-it projects with an eye towards life of 100 years, that we might be adding some kind of capacity, while that's not the intent of it, that if it is over $15 million, that we'd have to go back and do an analysis of.
Okay,
So that's a process that we're very much aware of and watching, and we'll be certainly implementing in the 21, 24 STIP process.
great. And I am happy to see that we are using our partners to the greatest extent that possible. This is a lot of work for us to stand up and get right. So I encourage that outreach with AGC and ACEC and all the folks that can help us understand where the barriers are to implement. Are we thinking on any of these to do CMGC or any design build or any other opportunities and ways in which we might be able to streamline and get thinking creatively about how we actually execute on this level of project?
Madam Chair, we are. We're
Okay, great.
looking at those type of things. The opportunities, though, are probably going to be pretty limited in this list, in that these are pretty simple paving,
Not much,
bridge,
yeah.
culverts that don't lend themselves to the attributes you see of alternative contracting. Certainly, as we get into Rose Quarter, that'll be a completely different
Absolutely.
scenario, and if we do come up with a funding source for 205, those are probably more primary targets for those type of alternative contracting. But there will be potentially some in here, some bridge projects that would lend themselves to a design build and some innovation in how they approach it.
I guess I would just, very supportive of whatever it will take for us to be able to execute both on budget and on time. So, good opportunities. All right, so the request is for this to go out for public comment and review.
Madam Chair, I so move.
Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you very much.
I'll see you next month.
Yes. Get some rest. All right, next we're going, and we're a little ahead of schedule. Are we too ahead of schedule for the team? Looking at Ken there. How about we take a 5-minute, we go ahead and switch out some nameplates, and then we'll have a discussion with NEACT. All right, well, I did ask them to turn the heat up in case anybody's having a little chill, just a smidge. And Mr. Sipp, I'm not sure, am I turning it over to you? I'd like to first just start by saying we're thrilled to be here, and really beautiful country, so it's nice to get out and about, and so thank you for hosting us. Met a few of you, gosh, a month ago, maybe two, it seems like 8 years, but I'll turn it over to you, and please walk us around the room, and we're looking for a kind of a not so formal, we want to hear how things are going, so feel free to, give us both we don't want to just hear that everything is roses, we want to hear if there are challenges as well, so that's an open door, so please, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Chair Bainey, members of the commission, before us is the Northeast Area Commission on Transportation, and we're excited to be here today, but definitely to have you up here in Wallowa County, and always welcome you to Region 5. That's fantastic, and looking forward to a very healthy, robust conversation today amongst this group, and I'm sure they have a lot that they do want to share with you with that. So I do want to maybe start and recognize the chair of our NEACT, which is Commissioner Steve McClure, and then maybe just go around and everybody can acknowledge and recognize themselves if we go around would probably be best. And then get in, I know there's 3 questions that was posed, and then we kind of want to leave it to open. And then an action item is to approval for our charter and commission, our active charter and work plan. So, okay? Okay.
Okay, I will start. Chair Bainey, members of the commission, we want to welcome you to Eastern Oregon. We think it's a great place to live. Every time I take my wife to Seattle or Portland, she swears she'll never go again. And LeGrand is just where she likes it, okay? Nothing to keep her in LeGrand like the traffic problems that you deal with on the other side of the state. So we do appreciate what you're dealing with. In LeGrand, we say we have a rush 5 minutes in the morning and a rush 5 minutes in the afternoon. So that's what we have to deal with. So we're not going to be demanding a lot of additional roads or anything else. But, there's a lot of good things came out of this bill, in my opinion, okay? I like the fact that we went to various forms of revenue besides the gas tax for everything. I think that was very important, and I think it's going to serve us well over time. You take transit, now that we have a funding source for transit, we know what it is. Transit can become dependable. Transit has always been one of these projects out here that goes like this, depending on the funding cycle. And with the funding that we're seeing that's probably going to come from this, it will give us the consistency that we need. I've been the board chair of Community Connections, which runs the transit in Wallowa County, Union County, and Baker County. So we run 3 counties, and it's a big area. And we've been doing it for a number of years, and we're excited to see that consistency given to those programs. I think the thing that I would caution you about is counties, okay? Everybody's expectations are counties are rich now. And we lost SRS, okay? And we were asked by Cliff Bentz to send him an endorsement, okay? And he got 10 of them, and 1 came from Union County. After the winter we went through and losing SRS, we were on the road to bankruptcy. I mean, it was a time. Now, I look at this funding that you're giving us that's going to come. This year, we're getting $235 plus a $58,000 from the small county allotment. We used to get, the last payment that we got from SRS was $580,000. And then it went back to the old 25% formula. It was $58,000. We lost $500,000. So you even see in this next year with what you're putting in here, we're still going to be behind the 8 ball. Now, if you take it over the long term of the funding cycle, we will come out better at the end, but it's going to be a long, slow climb for us. And of course, the expectation in my community is going to be, hey, the state raised all this money, how come you haven't fixed all the roads? And if you have time, when you go back through Elgin, before you get to Elgin, when you come off of Cricket Flat, there's a road called Good Road, If you got time, drive down it, okay? It is the absolute best explanation of the problems that we deal with, okay? It's supposed to be paved, and it's you know, we actually met with the property owners out there, and we explained to them we didn't have the money. You know what they told us? Go out and get more money. I mean, so they endorsed what we did. And we actually did a resolution for Cliff. He came and asked us to do it. So we absolutely have buy-in in this thing. I think it's important for the cities. It's important for all of us. I am excited to see the oversight and the involvement of the legislature in this. Timelines, you know, and I think going forward, that if you can maintain that relationship with the legislature, it's going to serve you well. The challenge, of course, is you can't let it become political. It has to be a true, honest oversight role so that you don't wind up dicing up the money politically to whoever has the most power. I mean, that's, to me, is the key to the thing. You know, I mean, we understand the politics and the way the bill was passed, and that's fine with us. You know, our legislator voted no, so we're in this pot, which is zero, and the other legislator voted yes. So we understand how it works. But again, we are excited, and from my perspective, we are. I guess I'm a little bit disappointed in Connect Oregon having to wait 4 years. That is probably one of the most difficult things for us. Those projects were the kind of thing that we could stick in the crack where we needed it. You know, I know Baker did on their airport. We're doing it on our airport. It helped on the railroads, the small railroads, and so on and so forth. But hey, you know, we understand, and we will deal with that. As far as our role, in my opinion, I look for it to continue. We've given you a work plan here, and if this is not the work plan you want us to do, you need to tell us if your expectations are different than what we've submitted to you here today. And in my opinion, NEAC has been extremely successful. We don't fight. We have sat down and worked things out. We worked with SEAC, so, you know, we're all a Region 5, and we've always had a good relationship with ODOT. You know, I remember when Matt came to me and wanted me to do the act, I told him, Matt, I don't need one. We don't have any problems with ODOT. He says, Steve, you got to do it for me. So I did it for him. But, and so that's where we're at. And again, I think this is really a game changer, the way this legislation came out. And I really have to, you know, give credit to the people that put it together. It's, you know, people say a lot didn't happen in this session, but this was as far as I'm concerned, is a gem that came out of this session. And I think the legislature needs to be proud of it, and you guys are going to have a lot of work, you know. I mean, they have clearly given you some tasks that you're going to have to move on. You're going to have to move quickly and efficiently to meet those timelines, and I have all the confidence in the world that you will. So with that, I'll turn it over to Michelle, and
We're done. No. Just kidding.
Really, I thought we were just saying, welcome, thank you for coming to our neck of the woods. My name is Michelle Owen, and I'm the Director of Public Works for the City of Baker City, and we are glad you're here.
Good morning. Some of you recognize me. Hello, Madam Chairman, members of the board, Matt. We're all very happy that you're here, and I'm very pleased to have the opportunity to speak with you throughout this this whole weekend, week, basically. One thing that I do want to get across very clearly right now is Mr. Garrett and his staff, as far as the road officials are concerned, are doing a wonderful job. They do a magnificent job. In Eastern Oregon, we have an extremely good working relationship with Region 5, with Craig and his folks. I just can't say enough good about them. And I know there's been some bad press this last year or two. Bad press is just exactly that. It's people that don't understand. I was very pleased to see that the commission came out and supported ODOT, Matt, and all those folks, because I think that it's very important. So I'll go ahead and turn this on and maybe have the opportunity to talk a little later on. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair Bainey and members of the commission. It is great to see you in, I guess we can say, far eastern Oregon. I'll welcome you from Umatilla County, which we're just the neighbors here to the west. But we're excited about the transportation package, what it means to our county. We really got some great benefits out of, or upcoming benefits out of it. And we're real happy. We did have a last minute resolution that was given to me just before I left home and headed over here from one of my commissioners, and I will leave that resolution. I won't take time to read it now, but it's concerning the interchange at I-84 and 209, which would be I-84 and 395 interchange, city of Pendleton. That seemed to be something that was on the radar for that area. They felt like it had gotten left out, and they wanted a strong consideration for that. Umatilla County Board of Commissioners yesterday in our board meeting passed a resolution that that would be a high priority that we're supporting. So with that, again, thank you very much for being here. Enjoy the clear weather. When you head home, I hope you don't have traffic all headed to view that clear sky on Monday. So
We used your fine airport, so we shortened our trip, so.
was that boutique?
Yes, we did, yeah. It was seamless. It was great.
Great, and I hope the flight was very good.
Yes, yes,
Good.
yep.
All right.
In-flight service was amazing. I mean, we had it all. Yep, it was great. Yep.
Okay. Well, I'm glad to hear that. So with that, I'll turn it over to Commissioner Doherty. Of course, I'm Larry Givens, which I failed to say, Commissioner from Umatilla County.
I'm Jim Doherty, co-chair, vice chair, if you will. I rotated in. I became a commissioner about 6 months ago, and rotated in as the vice chair because I'm taking over for Judge Tallman, who had 15 years experience. So this is quite a learning experience for me, but it's really been wonderful. You guys are faced with a tough challenge, I see, because you look at transportation, and that means for a lot of people to get from here to Salem and never take the cruise control off and get there as quickly as possible. I'm not sure that there wasn't a lot of value humanistically when you had to wander through every main street between here and there. So you gotta appreciate that value as well. And I think the same challenges we have in Morrow County is we see out here in Area 5 more and more the people are gravitating to the enterprise zone areas and to the interstate and to the railways, and these wonderful communities that are tucked back in the hills that were all natural resource based are really struggling to hang on. So you see areas, that are just, and Morrow County and the Port of Morrow is a wonderful example. We've got 7,000 jobs there, but we import 75% of our labor, and, the people are starting to move there, but, our county seat, Heppner, was, it peaked in 1960, and the 2 or 3 towns around it are the same way. So we've got to hold them whole, and I really see the potential in doing that with some transit dollars. Who wouldn't want to live at the foot of the Blues and be able to come down and, the third highest paid wage in the state. There's some wonderful jobs, and you can get on that transit and you can, be on your smartphone and do those kinds of things. And so I think it's a wonderful opportunity. And with that many folks in a closed campus, I can envision, the old and the new. You drop people off at one central location, they get on automated vehicles, they move about the campus. There's the old and the new, but we've got to understand that. And in these communities, the bike and the ped stuff is huge, because we need that sense of community as well, on the home front to hold these whole. So I think there's some wonderful opportunities with the funds that are coming our way, and so I think there's the dichotomy of moving the freight and moving the folks, and also trying to hold people whole. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. I think it's also, so for the transit conversation, I'm not sure if everyone was in the room, but Mr. Guard is here, and we are going to be needing to hear from you how we roll out this opportunity. We need to make sure that whatever it is that we develop doesn't have unintended consequences, and the state looks different, and it should, and we want to celebrate that uniqueness. So that's an open invitation to, if you have ideas, and when we send out that we need input, that means you. So just thank you for raising that. In 6 months, we should get a photo of him now. And then, I've been 11 years, yes. So anyway, welcome.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, my name is Byron Smith. I'm the city manager for the city of Hermiston, and so grateful for this new additional funding that's coming along that will help us as a growing city address a lot of our needs. And just to let the commission know, our council's seriously considering additional local funding to match that so that we can really address the needs and not just kind of take the skim off the top. So appreciate the investment that the state is making. Also appreciate some of the past projects that we've worked on. ODOT did a great job overlaying 395 through the city of Hermiston. Did that under a special schedule that really minimized interruption for our businesses, and it turned out to be a great project. We have 2 ongoing projects that we're working on with a trail project as well as a couple of signals, and so they've been really great to work with us and find ways to get solutions to issues. So thank you very much. Glad you're here on this side of the state, and appreciate the opportunity to talk with you.
I'm Ken Patterson, the area manager for Eastern Oregon with ODOT. What I'm going to do is I'm going to read a statement from George Murdoch, a Umatilla County resident that Commissioner Givens shared with me, and then I'll offer my seat up to Commissioner Susan Roberts so that she can have a seat here at the table. This is a statement in regards to the 209 interchange, and what Mr. Murdoch has wrote is last week he'd had an opportunity to meet with 4 officials from the city of Pendleton, including the mayor, the city manager, as well as the local representative from ODOT and Kathleen Cathy from Senator Ron Wyden's office. The purpose of the meeting was to discuss the 209 interchange, which is considered to be one of the major transportation problems in Eastern Oregon. Unfortunately, the transportation package passed by the legislature did not include consideration for this interchange. By some counts, the 209 interchange is the busiest in Pendleton. As the intersection of US 395 and Interstate 84, it is heavily utilized. Added to these 2 major highways are a number of other local streets that pour into the Southgate Road at or near this intersection. It is important to note that in the event of the Cascadia subduction, US 395 is only one of 2 north-south routes likely not to be impacted by the event. Certainly, it should have been considered for funding as part of the transportation package, a document which did provide for several major projects, including work to help with this interchange serving the depot project. While this matter primarily involves the City of Pendleton and the Oregon Department of Transportation, it is also a vital link serving a number of local county roads. With that in mind, I'd like to propose a resolution to the effect that we consider the 209 interchange to be the highest priority in Umatilla County with respect to state and federal highways, including bridges and interchanges. And I believe this resolution kind of corresponds with that from Umatilla County. Okay. Okay, with that, I'll give my seat up to Commissioner Roberts. Yeah, actually,
Madam Chair, I didn't have time to get copies made before I headed over here, so
might be a couple.
All right.
thank you.
Staff. Okay.
You're going to leave? I'm Aaron Palmquist. I'm the city manager of Oregon in Morrow County and a member of the NEAC. And I want to say thank you to the commissioners and Madam Chair. It's always good to a previous boss. So you are looking better and doing better. And I still watch Central Oregon where I have my heart, and I still have some kids and hopefully grandkids soon. So I do want to say, and I appreciate what Tom and Commissioner McClure said, about working with ODOT. It has been in 25 plus years in city county management and interaction with ODOT on the west side and then central and now over on the east side. It has been great, even though Craig and Ken have they know how to take punches and keep smiling. And they look, and we get to a resolution. And I'm not just saying that because you guys are here and Matt, that you're here. It has been a joy everywhere I've been. It's not always been pleasant. Some of them are obstacles, but they look how to get to yes, and that is very, very great. I also sat on, in Morrill County, I'm the chair of we call it the Loop. It is the special transportation program for the state in Morrill County. So I'm the committee chair for that, and we're doing things which is serving people with disabilities, seniors, and other. But it's open for the whole county, and we revived that about 2 years ago. It's been very effective, and now we're looking in the region doing the, I think they call it the SHED program, exploring how we can do mass transit and how we can improve. So I'd love to be part of that because we're exploring how we can best serve not only certain populations, but the whole population and make it tighter across our whole region. So it's very, very effective. So I appreciate that. I also want to say that hopefully not stepping on some people's toes like Umatilla County, but I feel like a kid in a candy store thanks to the Honorable Representative Greg Smith in this package after my city gave me directions, said write a letter to various legislators, including the House, Speaker of the House, Tina Kotek, and where we stood at it as a city and some other things. So we support it and still do the project. And part of what we're doing as a city, and if anyone wants to learn how to do it, we've enacted user fees because as a small city, you don't get a whole lot of resources. We're going to see some benefit for that. That is very good, but we've been saving. I'm one of those 20, 30-year out planners looking how we can improve our city streets and bike and ped areas. But in this last legislation, the candy store is I have a $3 million coming my way to do transportation-related stuff. And I've already been in contact with the region, with Ken, and we're looking at that. Our engineers putting together. So it's going to be great. So when you come through, the first thing that the council has, because we've had a downtown plan, there'll be sidewalk on the south side of 730. So it's going to look different, and we're going to do some roads that they're not going to be, we don't have one, Steve, that's called a good road. We don't have any good roads, period. They're all tore up, so it'll be good. The thing that I would ask for all of my peers here is, and Commission, that the legislation did really, really well on this process. It was hard, a tough nut, but I think that the state needs to do another step for other infrastructure, and that's our water and sewer projects that we have across all of our communities. It is broken. We're hurting. So this is a step, and hopefully our legislators and maybe even other agencies can learn what ODOT and the OTC have done to learn from that how we can get to help our communities, because that's probably the other two legs that are hurting our communities. And so I'm going to try to take some energy and say, how do we fix that? Because to make our communities healthy and vibrant and whole for the next 30 plus years, we've got to do something different than what we've ever done. Because riding the same horse, it's dead. It's time to dismount. And I like what Tom and, is it COVA? Whatever the organization with the counties that you guys did to come up with a new funding plan. The Oasis. Was a good thing, good model. And Tom, from our region with some other individuals and counties led that. That was very successful. And I think it is benefiting the whole state, all of our communities, all of our counties. And I think it's a good model that could be to do other places. So could be better, but they came to a compromise. And Tom, thanks for, counties are benefiting, so are the cities. So I think it's a good thing because I think Representative Smith said it's about 48. It's going to increase to our state revenue shares for our streets. So that's what the city of Oregon will get. So I think that's positive. I don't know what the counties all got, but that's positive. It's a lot more than I've had. So it's good to be here. I'm glad that you're here. Enjoy. And Ann?
Let's go back to Susan, yeah.
Susan?
Oh, no, go on. Go on.
I'm Commissioner Beverage, Union County. I just started in January, so I'm lucky to work with Steve. Just here learning, so I'm the alternate for NEACT, and I've already learned a lot today, so thank you.
We'll count us as a resource. We serve you as well, so whatever we can do to help you be successful, let us know.
Okay, thank you.
Shall we come back around?
I'm Mary Jo Carpenter, and I'm with Community Connection of Northeast Oregon. And I've been with the agency for about 30 years, and so been manager for 25 or so. So we have grown. I'm in the Baker County offices, and we've grown our system from the senior bus that drove around a few hours of the day to now a system where, believe it or not, we have a little one bus fixed route in Baker City with paratransit. We do an intercity to between Baker and LeGrand that serves North Powder and Haines, which have no other source. As you remember, years ago, the Greyhound used to go by those little towns, and they've dropped those towns off their routes. So those folks didn't have any access to get anywhere. They do now. And so we've seen considerable growth. And now with the advent of House Bill 2017, I don't even know if I can explain the amount of excitement going around amongst all the public transportation providers. I'm also on the Oregon Transit Association Board of Directors, and so was lucky enough to be a part of a great team that worked really hard to provide information, hiring a consultant to create information that was that really explained in a good way the problems that public transit had. It was an absolute crying shame that our that our state didn't have like this dedicated public transit funding source. That was just crazy. And so I'm happy to see that that has succeeded along with all the other pieces, that transportation was looked at as a whole. I'm also on the Public Transit Advisory Committee. So I work with Hal Gard, and he's been a pleasure to work with, as has the whole Rail and Public Transit Division team. And we've enjoyed working with that. We're really lucky, actually. Our area, our Region 5 has some great staff. Craig's taken up the reins, and he had some large shoes to fill, and he's doing a good job of it. And we work really well with ODOT in our region, and we just, we couldn't ask anything better, I don't think. So I'm looking forward. I also spoke with Representative Benz. He came around and again talked about the legislative session, and of course a big part of that conversation was the House bill that's so important to all of us. So I'm really happy that you're here visiting us in our neck of the woods. And the other thing I'm really excited about is we're having the Oregon Public Transportation Conference in Pendleton this year. And in all my years, this is the first time I can remember it's on the east side. So we're gearing up, and we're going to be hoping to give all the providers a good experience out here. And we're going to have our vendors. I'd invite any of you to come to the Public Transportation Conference. I can send it out, or I'm sure you'll know about it, but it's always been a great conference. It's grown over the years, and they have some good content in it. And we're looking forward to hosting that in our neck of the woods, and I don't have to drive over for hours and hours. So anyway, thank you and welcome.
Quick question, not to put you on the spot.
Sure.
Teeing off from, but I will. In terms of transit and in terms of the new funding and the responsibility and requirements that it now places on our smaller providers, capacity concerns, or is there anything that you want us to know as we're developing? And again, please give input, but is there anything that's that's on the top of your mind that you want us to know as we go through this process?
And I believe this will be a huge learning curve. And I mean, here at Community Connection, we're pretty blessed. We've got a really good infrastructure in place. We're in 3 counties, and we have developed more infrastructure than some of the other rural providers. But I think of, I can think of Angie and Grant County, who's almost, I mean, she's got very limited resources. So, I mean, it's not, and yeah, as with anything in the transportation world, we have all had plans. We've got plans developed and ideas for project already developed. So I would say what I would request is an understanding that it might roll out a little bit more slowly in the rural areas due to the limited time. My job itself, I'm not just managing transportation, I'm doing Older Americans Act, I'm doing community action programs, I'm supervising all those things. And so I don't have that dedicated time. And so rural area, multiple hats, takes a little bit longer to roll out. And I'm always cautioning those who are monitoring not to get over expectations about numbers. I mean, rural areas we're small populations. And so when you are trying to measure us with really large numbers, it's hard to maybe show that this was actually a success, even with smaller numbers than what you might think it might be. Because now what I see is we're going to be able to do is we have some really isolated areas that don't have service at all because, there's economy of scale and, how much can you dedicate to provide a service out there. So I think there is going to be a challenge, but the good news is that this money is going to provide the opportunity for rural providers to develop that infrastructure that they were not able to before. But it'll just take a little time. I hope that answers what you...
Thank you
Thanks.
very much.
Angie Peters, Union County Public Transit through Community Connection. I've got about 4 months experience in the industry, so I'm super new, but I don't think I could have picked a better time to start. And then just being with Community Connection, I've kind of lucked out with having really great resources for learning the industry. I've got Mary Jo with 30 years, and then I was pretty lucky that our RTC for Region 5 was the previous person for my position, so I can always reach out for those really specific questions.
Read that to say ODOT stole our staff. Give them heck.
Hi, I'm Dennis Sands, the mayor in Joseph, and a NEAC member from Wallowa County. And I want to thank the commission for doing this outreach and visiting. Last year, the Joint Committee on Transportation did their run around the state, and I met with them in Hermiston. And ever since, a lot of positive things have happened. I'm especially happy about the increase for the special city allotment from $1 million to $5 million. And I talked to a lot of the legislators and I said, the single biggest thing you can do for rural Oregon is to increase that to $5 million. For our small cities, that's going to have the biggest impact of anything else that happened in the legislature. So I was really pleased to see that. Tomorrow morning, there'll be a brief trip, I guess, to see the proposed bike path from Joseph to the foot of the lake. And as you leave the county, you might pay attention to the railroad tracks that run from Joseph to Elgin and just imagine the bike trail alongside that and the impact that would have, positive impact on the county. And again, thank you for visiting.
Hello, Jonetta Everano from the Confederated Tribes of the Umatilla in Pendleton. I'm fairly new to the Public Works position as well as NEACT, and so I have a lot to learn. And it's a great opportunity to be here and listen to your visit here and all the important things being discussed. Having come on in May with the tribes, it's been a challenge to, I guess, bring our roads program up to speed. We have a lot of roads that, in my mind, don't meet the traffic we have on it. I have some safety concerns with the traffic on those. And so being here and learning and listening to this and having learned that the budgets have been increased for small communities like ours is a really, really good thing. And I'm looking forward to learning more, improving communications with the county so that we can better some of the roads on the reservation. They've been neglected, and I think it's important to, I'll fight tooth and nail to help get the safety aspects of those things and work in conjunction with the rural communities around us to better that. We have a couple of good projects coming up soon, and I am looking forward to the challenge and looking forward to learning more and seeing what I can do to I guess, bring the communities together too and continue that communication and continue that growth as a full community. So I really do appreciate you guys coming and being here today, and appreciate the opportunity to be here as well.
Mayor Sands mentioned the visioning panel that the governor was a leader on. That work really highlighted that we are one Oregon. So count us in as a resource. I mean, our system needs to meet the needs of those that we serve. So if you need anything, welcome aboard, and just count us in as partners and resources if there's something that you need. Yeah.
Hello, I'm Mavis Hartz, and I'm with Mountain Works Bicycles in the Grand, and I'm part of the NEAC, and I look at the bike and the ped portion of it. I'm still seeing how it all plays out, so here we are.
I can pass again.
Well, or the floor is yours.
Thank you. I too, as the mayor, the former mayor of this community that we're in today, and as the county commissioner for the last 9 years here, welcome all of you here. Welcome Matt back. I don't think he's been back since we took him to Lewiston over the road. Wasn't sure he'd get back yet. My job here today was at the behest of Mr. Patterson to praise ODOT's Region 5. However, he didn't pay me as much as evidently Craig paid Tom. So my comments will be a little slightly derogatory about Region 5. Our issues are not any different than anyone else's at this table. We're kind of out on the end of nowhere, which had you all driven here, you would know. Flying in doesn't get to count, Tammy, so I'm sorry. We drove from Pendleton.
Actually, it's the
Getting back.
Right now, you can't even hardly
Well,
get gas.
you're not going to go home until Wednesday of next week anyway, so. Yes, and I tomorrow I'll be on the bus with you to point out that you are on the Hurricane Creek Highway in case you can't read the signs. And that you will be looking at the area where the bike path or the ped path is going to be from Joseph to the lake, which is not the Wallowa County Park, it's just the park. We have issues with the park. So I do want to thank you all for coming all the way up here. Our road issues are a little bit different. We have 700 miles of road in Wallowa County and not very many paved roads. So we're having a road issue now out on one of the northern bluffs. There are full-time year-round people who live out on Eden Bench, and their road's about to fall off the side of the mountain. And so we're going to be looking at a project out there that will be far beyond our capacity to do. And so we're going to be looking at means and method to make it so that we can stabilize that. It's out in the canyon where the fires occurred a few years ago, where we have washouts every single year when the snow melts and the creeks come down, and it takes the road every year. This particular road hadn't had those issues, but this year when we did a survey out there, we're going to lose it. So it's critical that we find means to put that and stabilize it and keep it on the hillside, because we do have about 20 year-round residents out in that area, plus the cattle ranchers and everything else that use the road. So those are some of our issues, along with all the other issues you heard today. So, thank you. Mm-hmm.
Okay, so we want to get into, it was a little different than how my name is, so it was good. So I guess, do we want to go to the questions? Do we want to go, we did a little peppering of that. Again, it doesn't have to be that formal. If someone, and after we went around, you were sitting on a comment and you want to throw it out, now I'm happy to to go that route as well. Or Craig, if you want to take us
That,
into a
that-
question.
that sounds good to me, Chair Bainey. That I think that we did kind of put the questions out there, but I do like that being informal, and we could use that kind of as a starting point. But really, I think we want to encourage an open forum as far as what we, from aspiring what we heard, but even more so. So, okay.
Please.
I just wanted to make one comment. Everyone around the table was thanking the commission and the legislature for doing the package and working hard and getting the package out. I'd like to thank the people of the state of Oregon who are going to be paying this package. And so I think we do need to keep in mind that it is the citizens who are going to be paying the extra cost to get where we need to be, so we kind of have to keep that in focus.
Yeah.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Please.
Commissioner, I think that's an excellent point. So often, we focus in on the amounts of the investments. I think it's incumbent upon everybody sitting around this table to articulate the benefits that come with the investment, because, again, we are stewards of that taxpayer dollar, and they need to see a return on it. I think Commissioner Simpson spoke to that a little bit earlier in our conversation. That might be the stewardship aspect may be the highest calling we have as public servants here. So I think as NEAC, as local elected officials, as a statewide commission and a statewide agency, articulating both sides of the ledger, because success breeds success. And if you can show the benefit that accrues in the area of transit in terms of connecting people, now from point A to point B that had no other way to get around, the ability to invest in roadways so they don't crumble to gravel, but we maintain a safe and efficient piece of roadway. Those benefits, and then reinforcing that, and then having a very straightforward conversation that even with the infusions of money, everyone understands the needs are significant. We could go around the room and articulate that. It comes down to implementing the package that we received. I think that's the first call of business of the state government as well as the local governments. And then again, articulating both sides of the ledger, because again, we are the stewards and want to make sure we do the best job we can with that money and deliver the benefit for our fellow Oregonians. So that's an excellent point. Thank you for making that.
Please.
If I could comment on your second question. You know, in Eastern Oregon, the maintenance of our existing system is very, very important. You know, we have always been opposed to giving up your existing system for new roads. You know, we don't think that is there's any sense in that at all, okay? So Region 5 has done a good job. I think you will find Region 5 roads are probably in better shape than any throughout the state. So they've done a good job on that, but we always want you to keep that in mind. Now, for economic development, for transportation, our needs tend to be smaller, you know, paved roads in an industrial park. Be as simple as that, you know. That doesn't sound like much, but that can be an issue to get people to come. And we are very limitedly funded, so those programs that provide those opportunities are very important to us. At the scale we have a lot more issues than just roads, okay? We've had discussions with OTEC, who provides power in Union and Baker and Harney County. And our problem is we can't get enough energy to bring somebody like Amazon or Google or anybody here. Now, we have wonderful connections in LeGrand. We have 4 fiber optic lines. And the manager of OTEC tells me, he said, Steve, I could get you from 3 to 5 megawatts. If I go beyond that, I got to build transmission lines. So that's a huge barrier to us, you know. And we're going through the battle of the B2H. I don't know if you know what B2H. It's Boardman to Hemingway power line, and we've been doing this for 10 years. They dropped it on us this summer that they're going to put it within 4/10 of the city limits of LeGrand, so it's going to be a real controversial battle that we're going to be going through in the next months. We had asked them to stay next to the 230, but stay out of the view shed of LeGrand, and they didn't do it. So, you know, we've got a lot of issues. It's also an issue of resources, natural resource issues. You know, when I became commissioner, we got $1.1 million the first year I was here from the Forest Service. And by 1996, it was down to $56,000. Okay, that's what the listing of salmon did to us. Everybody talks about the spotted owl. We in Eastern Oregon that are not covered by the dams in the Snake River wind up with an endangered species that was just as hard on us as anything the spotted owl. And we didn't get any support from the federal government. We got nothing. So we have been living, hand to mouth. SRS with Senator Craig and Ron Wyden, the thing was there for almost 17 years, and they stopped it this year, okay? So resource issues are big for us. So there's a whole myriad of issues that we have to deal with. I mean, I sit and look at Umatilla County, who changes 80 acres of EFU to industrial, and Amazon gives them 4 call centers. Do you know what those call centers are worth? What are they worth, Larry?
I'm not supposed to say.
Okay. Larry won't tell you because he's negotiating a SIP as I speak. I know he is. But we can't do that in Union County, okay? Then you go to the windmills in Gillum and Sherman County, they give money back to the citizens from the wind farms, and they're still losing population. So I don't know what that says about Sherman County. And then you see what's going on in the Dalles? You know who's building that big building down there? Google. I was in the Dalles last weekend for a GOBI meeting, and all these construction people are there, and you ask them where they're working, and they all tell you, well, we can't tell you. Everybody knows it's Google. I mean, but Google is so paranoid, they don't want anybody to know anything. And then we sit out on this far east side. You take the far 6 east side counties, Malheur, Harney, Baker Grant, Union, Wallow, we're almost a third of the area of the state with 5% of the population. And it's a different role. I don't know if any of you have seen the book that the Employment Department put out about employment in Eastern Oregon. You need to get a copy of that and read it. It's real, There was a piece in Time magazine in 2008 that said there would be parts of this country that would not recover from the 2008 recession. And it would be rural areas with older populations. And guess what you're looking at here? We're rural areas with older populations. And it's very difficult for us to do it. It's just easy to say, hey, go out and find an economic development answer. I don't know what it is, and it's not because we haven't looked. And, Port Morrow is a great example. I mean, look what they've done for Morrow County. I mean, I'm envious, but we have drawbacks where we can't do it, and Baker County isn't any different than we are. So
we're younger.
but transportation is important, but there's still a lot of other issues that really impact us out here. And when you talk about it, our transportation system on the state level is not bad. Our problem is city and counties, okay? And I think that's pretty consistent. There's a few that aren't. You take Grant County, they got enough timber receipts at one time, they have reserves, but the rest of us are pretty much hand to mouth, aren't we, Susan?
I'm not quite there yet. I still have a little bit more.
Well, good.
So commissioners, do we have, I know that you were holding on to a question as well, or a comment.
Just more a comment.
Okay.
And I think going back, and I think one of the reasons we're here is that we want to have a lens of the concerns of each county, see what's happening from an economic development standpoint. And clearly, when we started, when we were charged to kind of come up with a framework for the legislation, maintenance of the current system was first and foremost, that we invest to preserve and protect what we have. And the governor had put together a visioning panel, which was to look at all modes of transportation and all geographic regions of the state. So we tried to incorporate the findings of that work and to look at safety concerns. Rural concerns are very different than in metropolitan areas, and the statistics, unfortunately, have gone south in a negative way on everything. So, is it distracted driving? So how do you get after safety? But then address the seismic concerns, which are probably more on the western side of the state, and we're in a safer part here. But transit was something that every community, big and small, wanted. People want to be able to get around in their communities, and so bike and pedestrian needs, and we had just finished a statewide plan there, but approached it with everybody has skin in the game, and heaven forbid I invoke the words of Ronald Reagan, but it was really he wanted transportation to be a user fee-based system, and that those who benefit from it, and this is to your comment, Susan, about those who benefit from the system should pay into it, and that we should draw less on general fund resources and have those who benefit from the system actually contribute to its maintenance, upkeep, and expansion. That was our approach. We went into it with everybody's got skin in the game, everything's on the table, and let's see where we go. And that's why, we currently have some of the lowest vehicle registration and licensing fees in the country. So they're going to trickle up a little bit. And looking at the mechanisms that are in place to pay for it. But as you guys well know, this stuff does not come cheaply. It's huge investment doing infrastructure. But it does make a difference in facilitating the kind of economic development we've seen, and that hopefully will come this direction. But it's not out of the realm of possibility. And I think I grew up in Deschutes County, and I don't think I would have imagined that Crook County would be an epicenter for servers either. So, things do change. I think transportation's a big part of it. Look, we're going to need your help and your input in how we execute this program going forward, and in the resources that'll be out here. But I just want to echo what's been said earlier, and thank you for having us here. It's really awesome to be here, and we're learning from you guys. So appreciate the conversation, and thank you for hosting us.
I feel like there's a common theme here in regards to the economic sustainability of this region, and I was just curious as to if this region has any plans or any ideas about essentially how it plans to stabilize, and more importantly, how it foresees its own growth. As I was articulating earlier about the reports that I was reading coming over, it did touch upon some elements of other parts of the state as well, and I believe this particular Northeast region has like a people in poverty level of those that are on upwards of 20,000, and I think that's pretty high for the amount of the population that this area covers. And furthermore, in terms of median income, I believe it's like around $20,000 to $25,000. So even though this is not entirely ancillary to transportation, in a lot of ways it is, because if there are aspirations and plans for this region in terms of how to restore or rebuild its economy and its ecosystem here, what role would the transportation system play in that plan? And that's one of the questions I had for you guys to elaborate on.
I like that one. Okay, so I represent the bike ped portion of this, and improving our area. I have a bike store in LeGrand, and I enviously watch everybody go up to Coeur d'Alene, and they ride the rail, line up there on their bikes, and they buy lights, and I enviously watch all these transcontinental cyclists coming through Baker, and they all go around LeGrand, which is where I'm based. We are the only bike shop in the region, so we pull 3 counties, often 4 counties worth of individuals into our shop. But LeGrand itself doesn't necessarily sustain us because all the money has to come from somewhere else. The way I see improving our area and getting more money into this region, related transportation is the path that would run from Wallow Lake all the way to Enterprise along that rail line. They have been pushing that. I have been crossing my fingers, and there's a lot of opposition to it, but it would pour money into various parts of this part of Oregon. The other thing that I really look at is the transcontinental people that are trying to go across the United States. They choose to go through Baker because if you choose to go through La Grande, you actually have to ride on the freeway. You have to ride on the freeway to get out. That's another issue that I would really like to see tackled. And yes, they have drawn up some very pretty sketches and we have talked about it, but it's also something that is very expensive because there are cliffs and rivers and salmon and a lot of factors to take into consideration. So back to bringing money into this area. Of course, I'm looking at tourism. Cycling tourism is huge, and those two things would really bring it to Wallowa County and Union County as well.
Madam Chair, to kind of go back to your question, Commissioner Simpson, talking about a sustainable economy for all of Eastern Oregon, as all of you know, Eastern Oregon from Deschutes and even Deschutes County on east is agricultural based. It's also ag based, a lot of it in the valley. But the opportunity for industry, where the population centers are, that helps Western Oregon grow, of course, and that's where the economy is. And I'll use Umatilla County kind of as an example. The eastern and northeastern side of Umatilla County has a much lower per capita average income than the western side of the county, simply because of location, location, location. They've got rail, they have river traffic, and the intersection of two freeways. As you move west into rural, or east, excuse me, into rural Oregon, yes, fewer people, a greater number of county road miles, most of them unimproved. And the biggest problem, I think, unless some of my colleagues from the other counties will correct me, are the young families or young children from those families. They look at other areas and say, I want a good family wage job, and they don't stay here. And it may be because of a number of factors. And it's not all transportation related, but that's a big part of it. So they'll move to the metro areas. Better jobs, better salaries. And what you see coming back to our counties are families with no children. They're retired. That income is limited to a certain extent. But a lot of times, they're not ready to invest in a lot of that infrastructure. So they're not willing to pay those extra dollars. You mentioned paying for that infrastructure. So as you come east, I do worry about the sustainability of the eastern side of the state, simply for those reasons. And when you look at the number of miles, and I'll use Umatilla County, we did very, very well on this last legislative session. And we had a state representative that, and I'm not embarrassed to say that, and I'm not apologizing for it, but we had a state representative that, because he'd been there a long time, was on some committees and had some seniority, brought back some money to his district. It was both Morrow County and Umatilla County. But when you look at the overall amount of roads and the distance that people have to commute, it takes more, and it takes more effort. Mary Jo talked about the needs in rural areas. Rural areas are unique, and you folks know that. and that she has to do several jobs. I don't know how many of you were raised and went to school in a very small community, or if any of you did. But a small community and the schools in that community with few students, those kids did everything. They may have been on all three teams. They may have been on the student body, officers, a lot of different things, because to function, they had to do a lot of those things. And that's kind of the way our rural communities are. So they need some special help, and we need some special recognition. I don't know if that makes sense or it answers your question, Commissioner Simpson.
Please.
As it happens, I was just doing some kind of demographic gathering as I was renewing our Title VI plan for civil rights. And I don't know why, but I was a little bit shocked because I tend to think of Baker County as kind of maintaining those numbers. It used to be our Baker County went between 18 and 20%, maybe a little bit higher, of those persons over 65 years of age. And but when I reviewed those numbers, and we're not younger. When I reviewed those numbers, 33% of Baker County are people over 60 or over. That's 1/3 of our county, 60 or over. And it's not to say everybody's retired, because obviously not, but it shows the demographic. Baker's demographic in the middle, kind of that working age, is lower in average than the state, and our child's, the small children actually isn't that much lower. So it really shows that people of working age leave. They go to school, they never come back. None of my nieces and nephews did, because we have no industry. When I was growing up, we had 2 lumber mills in Baker City, and there were family wage jobs. They carried benefits. Those are all gone. Nothing has replaced it. We have Balin Manufacturing. So Baker County has made great strides to develop a wonderful tourism industry. The nature of tourism generally generates service jobs, and this is where you're seeing the wages that you are, because what you're seeing is people who are working in restaurants, they're working in motels, they're working in retail stores. There is no I don't want to say there's no industry, because they worked to bring some industry in, but and one of the comments that I heard in relation to transportation, where this kind of my meandering conversation's going, is that at one point in time I remember a conversation, and that if we were to develop some kind of industry, we need better. We do have the rail going through Baker, we have the freeway going through Baker, but if we were to develop something like, I don't know, Google coming in, whatever, is a really developed airport, because people who are bringing executives in, or if they need to travel, this is a remote area. They're probably not going to want to drive 3 hours. Our closest airport, large airport, is Boise, which is a 2.5-hour drive. So I would say, if anything, the fiber optics, we need that, and because I think that is helpful to create, and the power and access by maybe way of air, or the 700-mile-an-hour bullet train or something like that. But anyway, so that's kind of where the rural areas lie, and I don't think Baker County is alone in that. The timber industry is gone, and that was, you saw generations work in there. You saw dads who worked in the mill and had a decent wage and a decent job, maybe a machinist or a manager or whatever, and their sons would go into that sometimes, and that just isn't present anymore. And I think that's a great loss, and that's why I think we're losing people. We're a great place to retire, but even in Baker City, we're discovering a housing crisis, and now we're struggling we have families, we have a family of with 7 kids right now who can't find a place to live. So we're starting to see some more broad things going on. But in terms of transportation, connectivity to help develop industry, that's.
I'd just like to make a comment that there are a couple ways I think that small counties can grow, and one of them is our natural resource. And we have great beauty here that's tough to duplicate. And we have plenty of timber if we could just cut it. So that's one leg of the economy. And the other is the internet. One of my counselors is a project manager for a high-tech company in the Bay Area. He works out of his house. He's gone maybe 3 or 4 days out of the month, but the rest of the time he's working from his house as a project manager in high tech. He countryized his kids. They raise cattle and have 3 or 4, and so they're loving it. But we have actually in Joseph a population explosion of little ones. I mean, we just built a new playground, and I mean, I've never seen so many little kids in strollers in my life. I said, where do these people come from? I mean, so, and we have people who went to school here, went to the West Side, went to college, and started a family, and they're moving back and they're buying businesses, hardware store, restaurants, and they want to raise their kids in this atmosphere. And we just need to add a little more infrastructure to help them along. But there are a lot of people that don't like the hubbub of the West Side. This area, all of Eastern Oregon, has a lot to offer. And I think as people look at it and say, hey, life is short, you know, I spent 40 years in Portland as outside sales. I spent half my life, I think, at stoplights. So when people ask me what I like about Wallowa County, number one, there are no stoplights. You know, that's the kiss of death around here. If I want to do somebody in, I said, I hear they wanted to put a stoplight in. Oh, really? Yeah, boy. So anyhow, I think there's a lot going on over here.
If I could go back to Matt's comment for just a little bit, and then I'd also like to make a comment on Commissioner Simpson's question. But to Matt's comment about efficiency and the way we spend our money, I've actually got 2 examples of that. One really good and one not so good. The fund exchange program. Currently, let me go back. A number of years ago, ODOT set up a fund exchange for the STP funds that came from federal government to counties and cities. That works marvelously. That allows us to turn what could only be used for capital improvements, basically, into maintenance dollars, and maintenance is very, very important to us. More recently, Paul Mather, McGregor Lind, and on our local liaisons like Mike Berry, they've put together a fund exchange program for bridges. I see that as being extremely important moving forward. We can't let that die. That has to be allowed to live. Josephine County, for instance, they just did an exchange on a bridge that was essentially, I think I haven't got the actual numbers on the cost savings, but as close as I can tell, we were talking about probably maybe up to a 50% cost savings by exchanging those dollars from a federal project to a state project. It was huge. Now the downside moving forward is some of the things that we're seeing through the intergovernmental agreements. These agreements are getting tied up in Salem to the point to where they are becoming extremely costly to the programs. We're seeing, one of my other hats, I sit on the State Bridge Selection Committee, and we have actually seen where, because of the window of opportunity to do some of this construction, these agreements get tied up in Salem, the projects can't be delivered in a timely fashion. So now all of a sudden we have money sitting in a queue that can't go out to the project because the IGA is not going through, it's getting hung up on somebody's desk. And that's a risk management thing. Quite honestly, Matt and his staff ought to be taking care of the risk management. The attorneys should just be approving the contract. Right now it's the tail wagging the dog. Matt and his folks are delivering a viable agreement to Salem, and then, for instance, we had in Umatilla County, I've had 2 agreements now that ended up having commissioner signatures going, and everything was all fine and good, went to Salem, got hung up on somebody's desk, and all of a sudden came back for nothing. I mean, it was some really insignificant things. And here, you know, attorneys tend to look for the perfect agreement that nobody's going to get hurt on. Well, I'm sorry. Agreements of any kind are risk. Risk management should sit with Matt and Craig and those folks. If they say we're okay to go, we should be okay to go. You know, some of the, I just can't say it strongly enough. I really believe that some of that's getting hung up because people just are so afraid that they're going to get taken to the cleaners somehow. Well, they're worrying about things that haven't happened yet. There's nothing in any of these agreements, nothing in any of this track record that can show the cause for the concern that they're showing. So, you know, at some point, and I believe that we're already there, I think the risk management portion of this is becoming very inefficient and very costly to all of these programs. I think it's a terrible thing, and we need to figure out a way. And I believe that you folks right there, I think it's a lot of it is in your hands, because I think that if the message comes from you that the driving force for this stuff needs to come from ODOT rather than from the attorneys, then I think that maybe some of that can get changed. Go ahead.
Our attorney, go right ahead.
I was just going to say, speaking as an attorney, I'm just shocked to hear that you think attorneys are overly risk averse. I've never heard that.
I knew I'd step on somebody's toes. I'm sorry.
You're fine. Please.
I wanted to go back on the economic question that you asked a little bit, and this is meandering even further than you were meandering, Mary Jo. I know that the acts were set up because Matt came out and twisted your arm, Steve, and they're really kind of a creature of ODOT. But certainly for Umatilla County and Morrow County, and I think probably to a large extent Union County too, that river is a key transportation corridor. And I'm pretty sure this is the case, but I certainly hope it's the case that as you're talking with your legislators, you're also reminding them of the importance of that river to transportation and really to the economy out here. We lose transportation on that river, and we're talking about really serious economic consequences for this area. And our legislators, I think, need to be reminded of that periodically.
Can I, you're speaking of Snake River?
Well,
Columbia River,
Columbia,
okay.
yeah.
Well, both.
Well, Snake too, yeah.
Last Monday, I did have the opportunity to meet with Energy Secretary Rick Perry and several legislators, both congressmen, both from Oregon and Washington, and we stressed the importance of the transportation side of that. and of course, wanting to sell some of the assets, make it privatize it. And the other issue was breaching for the Snake River dams. We pointed out the importance of the transportation, how much it relieved highway congestion, trucks, one barge taking 27 semis worth of wheat. A tug will transport 4 barges at once down the river. So the amount of diesel, all of it put together, and the fact that 1/3 of the wheat in the western U.S. comes through the port of Lewiston. And so that was huge economically. That would be as bad, if not worse, than when some of the spotted owl issues, loss of the mills, and the list of things goes on. So that's a huge part of that transportation package also, not to mention the power grid that's involved.
The other thing I want to say on it, sort of moving to a different topic, is when we were here as a commission, I don't know what it was, 4 years ago or 5 years ago, I remember you, Mary Jo, talking about what was happening out here in terms of bungling together a transit system. And we've been working on this statewide transportation plan for public transportation, and J.D. Tovey from the tribes has been sitting on that group, and I'm learning more and more about what you're doing out here. And I just want to say it is kind of inspiring. It really is. And I really look forward to seeing what now you're going to be able to do with some steady revenue. Not as much as we'd like, but it's a start. And I look forward to great things in terms of public transportation out here in this region, because you've got such a great start already.
Please.
If I might, going back to Commissioner Simpson, one thing I really like is the way the Oasis way it's been reworked, you know, where the large counties out here with the lower population are getting, you know, more of the dollars on the ground. And you got to appreciate too that a lot of the metro area uses this not only as their playground, but also as their renewable energy resource. But one thing they do grow out here is of course livestock and onions. And I think it bears mentioning the transload facility, you know, that's going to come out of this in Malheur County. That's huge. You know, it's going to, I mean, $15-20 million it's going to save them. It's going to hold a lot of folks there whole too. So so those kinds of things. It doesn't just have to be asphalt. You know, I don't know whether you know a livestock kill plant, you know, out here or something, a USDA plant, you know, where you can process, because it's got to be in the processing of these ag products out here is really where you can make it work. But so thinking outside of the box and bringing things like that in is pretty huge.
And Tom, your comments are not lost on me on the contracting piece either, or any of us really. I think in order for us to execute what is in the package, we will have to work closely with our sister agencies, which is the Department of Administrative Services, Department of Justice, really all of us rowing in the same direction to make sure that we can actually fulfill what's necessary. So thank you for bringing that up. And don't be shy if there are other things that you want us to know. I mean, if we hear your example of ways in which there's a barrier, we can't move it if we don't know of it. So
yeah,
please.
To that, the only reason I bring it up now is because coming to this point has been a big frustration for not only me, but I hear this from a number of county road officials. It's not just I'm not just being the squeaky wheel here, and I won't pretend to speak for them, but it's moving forward. I just hate to see this thing go in more of a negative direction, you know, because it's not working very efficiently. It's costing a lot of money, a lot of taxpayer dollars. I understand, you know, we all have risk in our household and our everyday life, and we manage that without a lot of agreements, and sometimes it goes bad, but if you add up all the times it doesn't go bad, you're probably way ahead of the game. And I just want to kind of remind folks that, you know, sometimes in a effort to become better, we don't become more efficient. You know, it just doesn't work that way. Commissioner Simpson, I didn't lose your comment at all either. I can only speak to you from the road standpoint, and you asked what the counties out here were doing for themselves to try to move some of the ball forward on some of this. We recognized a number of years ago that, for instance, in Wheeler County, it would not do them any good to pass a county gas tax because, quite honestly, they'd make about $15 a year. And even to a certain extent in Baker County, most of the Eastern Oregon counties, they were in a situation where trying to move money from the county to the county road system forward just wasn't working. And that was when we started about 4 or 5 years ago working on the formula for the distribution of the state highway funds to the counties. And so, and I'm not taking any credit for that at all, I'm just saying that Eastern Oregon was very instrumental in moving that part of the package forward. It was recognized that road miles were not being looked at as any part of the funding, so we were finally able to get a little bit of parity in the system when we went with the formula for the special county allotment. And you know, it wasn't the silver bullet, but I got to tell you, counties like Wheeler County are going to be very appreciative. So we are and we have been doing some things for ourselves in trying to move that ball a little bit. And every little bit that happened, you know, that we get it moved, it really helps. I mean, and we appreciate it. We appreciate the taxpayers a lot.
So do we have anything that you want to highlight in the charter bylaws or the work plan? Anything in particular that you, so if not, we do have that action item. Do we have comments or other, please?
If I may, and Craig, validate this for me. When I read the bylaws and the direction that NEAC is taking here in the attachment 3, and to Commissioner McClure's earlier statement, I think it is well within alignment of the direction where this commission and this agency is going. Again, you are comprehensive in your approach. I think you have very creative and innovative individuals sitting around the table, and you look for those opportunities. And I think it's embedded in this document. So my read is it's extremely consistent. But I think from that I'd like to jump off and just put an issue on the table, because this is something we're going to have to grapple with. We should celebrate House Bill 2017. It is historic in nature, and it's going to do good things for the transportation system. But you also have to recognize that it's somewhat prescriptive. And so the relationship and the conversation that we've had in years past, mostly challenging because we didn't have the revenue, so how do we make things work? With the area commissions on transportation, I think is going to shift. And so maybe it's too soon, you haven't taken a look at holding, okay, here are the realities that now come at us versus that discourse that we have engaged in over many, many years to inform transportation policy programs and investments here. But if you look real closer, there's a little bit of a shift here. So I think the first question tries to get at that. What do you see the ACT's role now? You have this significant bill that really is probably an 8-year bill over the life of it when all is said and done. You can reach out to 10 with some investment streams, that's fine. But what do we do from now until then in terms of this conversation? Just any thoughts would be appreciated.
If you don't mind.
Please.
Director. In reading through this, and then I haven't had a chance to read through the entire transportation bill and what strings come with any of this. And I think the role of the acts now are to have our meetings and dissect these things so that we have a chance among all of us to sit at the table in LeGrand like we do and have these discussions about what is that and what does it mean that we have to do now in order to get this funding piece and get it coming, like the bridge fund exchange. We had a bridge in Wallowa County that went from $750,000 to $1.8 million. We could have probably done it for a lot less, but it was a federally, so for us to be able to sit around our table with our region folks and have those discussions about where this takes us, and because I'm not cognizant enough to say now that what that little shift is and what strings are going to be, and I've got to talk to my road department guy and say, we can't do that that way anymore, and we're going to have either more paperwork or more reporting or more whatever, which puts it puts a hamper on them because they're grader operators. And I'm nowhere near qualified to be, Tom in our county.
Sure.
And Lon doesn't want to be Tom. So that's where I'd like to go with it, is to give us that amount of time in our ACT regions to get these things. And we work closely with the Southern ACT to do that.
Commissioner, I think that's more than fair and more than appropriate, because there is an opportunity to engage the agency and the commission, because we are actually going to be having the conversations of how we build future STIPs, the way we build our budget as we start to move forward now for the next legislative session, right? There's no rest for the wicked here. But I think the issues of fund exchange, those seeds are laid out there. If we grow that fund exchange, there's great opportunity. There may be other issues with the immediate opportunity fund. Again, that last connection into an industrial site that can sustain or create jobs. Those are the types of discussions that will transpire with this commission over the coming months here. And I think using the collective wisdom of not only the county and city representatives, but then again, the collective wisdom of an area commission on transportation. You can inform that conversation as well as the overarching discussion about transportation, where we're taking it in the state of Oregon. So.
If I may add, how many strings are attached to Eastern Oregon that you have to meet to get the money in 20? And do we have strings attached to us?
Not so much strings. There are some triggers. There are some obligations.
What triggers do we have
and
out
responsibilities? Well, we have to report on certain things. We have to make sure that the way the state, the counties, and the cities report the condition or the health of the system, that we're coordinated. So we're going to have to align on that front. It is the accountability side of the House Bill 2017. Significant charge given to the commission, significant charge given to the agency, and I would submit a significant charge given to local governments as well. And that's fine. They're clothed in the garment of accountability, and that's a good thing. So we'll tighten those things up. I don't consider those strings. I consider that just good business. And it helps build trust and confidence. And I think that's the direction that we go here.
But from my point of view, as an ACT, we need to know what you people want us to do. I mean, if this is the job that we need to do and we need to change the way we're doing business, tell us, okay? And then we can answer the questions and we can participate. We can sit down and work with the cities and counties about how we're going to account for our roads, so that we have a consistency across the state. I mean, that's what we can do. I don't think any of us think there's going to be a change or not going to be a change in what we do. Tell us, go right here and have this, tell this man what you want us to do.
Well,
and we will tackle it for you.
I'll speak for the agency. You tell us what you want your Oregon Department of Transportation to be as well. It is the dialogue that I think has been successful over the years.
Yeah.
Commissioner Brown and then Commissioner O'Halloran.
Yeah, and I look at the acts, and I helped stand up the one in Rogue Valley. And so that was a long time ago. And we didn't know what we were doing. You look at what all of you have done and the value you bring to the agency on what do you need? What's important to you? Don't stop doing that. I think that's the biggest value you provide to the agency through Craig. Craig needs to hear from you. What's important? Don't ever stop giving that information. What Craig and the agency and the commission owes you is not, oh, you can't do it that way. We owe you, here's how we can get there. Right now, I think what we're seeing is these next couple of years, few years, as we start to implement House Bill 2017, there may not be as much that we can help you because of the earmarks that are in this bill. None of us like that. Well, some of us probably do. I'm not sure I do where I live, but that's the reality of how we got this bill passed. There are some really good things with transit, but we don't know what those are yet. So we need to make sure that we give you as much information on how to do some new things, what other funding sources are out there. We don't always do as good a job as we could on what other funding sources are there. How can you combine things to make things happen, especially when some doors are shut? Yeah. So it's a bigger job really for our ODOT folks to make sure that we feed as much information on how to do some of the things that maybe you haven't done it that way before. But don't stop talking. Don't stop bringing us your priorities. That's the biggest value that you can give us. I think what you've laid out, how I read this, it's really good. There may be something tomorrow that comes up that we'd say, hey, you should do it this way. But that's where Craig comes too. But I think you're on that path of really doing incredible things for an extremely large area, in Northeast Oregon. And thank you for that.
If I could comment, I think that there's another value we don't want to forget. And we've done this for a lot of years, and we have a lot of relationships here in the NEAC, okay? And those are valuable relationships. There's a value in those relationships. There's a value when we sit down together with cities and counties and all the other partners in this thing, and we talk together. And even if it's going to be a little bit difficult for this transition, I don't think we should give that up. I mean, I think it makes a stronger organization. You get more buy-in. And sure, it's going to be a difficult time, and you guys are going to have to meet your timelines, and we need to understand that, and we will continue to work, with you in the appropriate fashion, But I don't think we should sell short just the strength of having this kind of an organization working with you.
Absolutely, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Commissioner O'Halloran?
Madam Chair, it's obvious from the discussion, this could go on forever, but I think it's a very active and engaged act. And with that, I would move that we approve the Northeast Area Commission on Transportation update, renewal of its charter, bylaws, and work plan.
Okay, do we have further discussion? Okay, go ahead.
Well, I'm sorry, I want to weigh in a little bit more. I on the issue of the earmarks, I do think they may change a little bit the focus that the act has. And I think a number of us have had a lot of sort of concerns about the earmarks, partly because over the years, ODOT has devolved a lot of authority down to the regional level. And that's been a really good thing. And in some ways, the earmarks go in the other direction. But I think the challenge for an act is going to be figuring out how to work with the legislators in the future so that they understand the local needs as well as you do, and hopefully as well as the agency here has. And so that in the future, if they're tempted to go to earmarks, they're at least the earmarks that you for sure want. So I think that change that's been brought about by the legislation kind of puts you in the position of having to pay even maybe a little more attention to your elected state legislators and to some degree your federal legislators, so that they understand the kinds of priority setting and sort of group dynamic that goes on here and can appreciate it, and they end up reflecting in their decisions the priorities that you have.
So I'm in a point of procedure, though.
Yes.
I'm going to have us vote. Let's go forward. Do we have other discussion on the item that's on the table for the passage of it's the work plan, the charter, and the bylaws? Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries. Commissioner McClure, I'll go to you, and then I'm going to go to Commissioner Givens and give you the final word before we transition into regional solutions.
Going to comment on earmarks. You know, when we did the transportation in 9, Greg Smith was my legislator, and we got a lot of earmarks, okay? And someone else didn't. So we understand how the game's played. I mean, you know, I think the benefit of the bill outweighs that, okay? And we're not going to worry about it. We'll deal with it.
Okay, Commissioner.
You know, this is more of a question, Matt, for you. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, you're saying, okay, what do we need to be doing? And I think it's a careful evaluation, even though we have those earmarks, but a careful evaluation by the NEAC, by the ACT committees, to make sure we're not wasting those dollars that the legislature fought long and hard to get for us, so that we're all on the same page. We can prove to that group, to those legislators, that we're using those dollars the way they had envisioned.
Yeah, no, I think that clarity is extremely important, and if we deliver on this set of investments, it allows us to position a conversation for the next set of investments. And just one final thing, the ability to leverage. That's another conversation you have to promote to us. What I heard, what jumped at me, a lot of different things going on in terms of transportation, and then what are the other needs, infrastructure as a whole. And again, that's the broad definition. But the one thing I connected, if you believe in the position that transportation is a means to an end and not an end in itself, the question back to us is, how can you use transportation, this body, to help inform and connect to other opportunities? And Mary Jo articulated one aspect, fiber optics. We got a lot of right-of-way. We can maybe breach or bring together a digital divide. Those are the type of innovative conversations that are just one-off from the meat and potato discussion. And I think the area commissions on transportations can inform that kind of conversation, and that's exactly the type of conversation we need. So.
And engaging the regional solutions teams as well to be able to bring the economy. Please, go right, if you have a quick, go right ahead.
Sorry, very quickly, just about question 1 in the roles. Maybe I'm a Pollyanna when I am sometimes, but one of the things that I try to watch out when in our rural areas, accountability is really a double-edged sword. As a taxpayer, I want every dollar accounted for, but as a provider, we have been accountability out of the ability to help because we spend more time doing reports and accounting and all that, and we are doing less and less service. And I'm not speaking that. Actually, the public transportation is as much planning and accountability as we do is not as bad as working with DHS. And so I guess in a way that I would like to see that there be a two-way conversation of these are the accountabilities that we need and put it out. And as a group, we're really good about discussing and trying to make things efficient. How can we efficiently report what you need and be able to provide you that feedback? And as well as continue to do all the wonderful discussions we've had in working together as partners and sharing resources to get things done efficiently in our counties. So that would be the only, as we go through this process and the A word raises its head again, just give us opportunity to, maybe we can come up with some really interesting ways to help be accountable as we need to be.
Excellent.
And
Thank you.
all.
Oh, I think that's wonderful. And let us, I hope that you can join us for dinner. We are going to be at the Outlaw in Joseph. We won't be outlaws, hopefully, unless you have a kind sheriff, I'm not sure. But just wanted to say this partnership is really important, and it's one in which I hope that you can feel proud about the fact that your fingerprints are on the strategic investment strategy that Commissioner O'Halloran mentioned, the visioning panel work, your voice is in that. That helps set the table for the package that we have to work with right now. And so you may feel that you are on this side of Eastern Oregon and we don't see you, don't hear you, but you are heard. And quite frankly, you've helped us really reconcile the fact that we are one Oregon, and it's important that we keep that in mind as we make decisions. So lots of ways in which we're going to ask you to be involved as we set up all the pieces that are necessary to fulfill the duties within this package. And so we look forward to further discussions and really appreciative of all the time and investment that you put in to making Oregon's transportation system what it is.
Again, I just want to thank you for making the 68-mile off-ramp trip from LeGrand. Did you drive all the way?
All right, so let's go ahead and we will meet our partners with Regional Solutions. All right, well, welcome. We are excited to hear. You just heard the conversation. We were talking about transportation, opportunity, growth, all those things, job creation. And so we are eager to hear about the opportunities and even challenges, ways in which we can help benefit this community. And so am I turning it to you, Ken? All right, so the floor is yours, please.
Well, I'd like to thank the commission for inviting the Eastern Oregon RST up to talk to the Transportation Commission. I think in our last session we heard quite a bit about some of the economic challenges and transportation challenges. And so the mix of projects that we're going to talk about today are kind of focused on transportation. So it sounds like that was a good alignment. What I'd like to do is introduce Courtney Crowell. She's our new coordinator for the Eastern Oregon RST. She's been on the job
4 weeks.
4 weeks, and so depth of experience.
We'll have so many.
So with that, I'll turn this over to Courtney.
Thank you, and thank you, Chair Baney and Commissioners. My name is Courtney Warner-Kroll. I am, like Ken just mentioned, I am the new Regional Solutions Coordinator for Governor Brown. So Regional Solutions for Eastern Oregon covers 10 counties, which is two different two different regional solutions regions. One is the Northeast, so Baker, Union, Wallowa, where we are now. And then we have the Greater Eastern Oregon, which is 7 counties of Gillum, Wheeler, Umatilla, Morrow, Grant, Harney, Malheur. That's it. Yes, that's it. So we've got a lot of territory. And like Ken said, I've been on the job for about a month, and it has been a wonderful experience so far, but it's mostly because I have such a wonderful team here. So we have 4 different agencies, including the governor's office here today. We've got Business Oregon, DEQ, and ODOT, and we do have a DLCD position that is vacant within our team. And we also work with Department of State Lands and Housing and Community Services. So that's sort of our team. And we are focused on, projects around the region to help improve community development and economic development, and transportation is obviously a key part of that. One thing I just want to sort of flag that the Regional Solutions teams will be working on over the next few months is through the legislature, we did receive $4 million statewide for the Regional Infrastructure Fund. So these are for sort of targeted investments in communities. That's statewide, so it's not a huge chunk of money for each region, but that the process for how those funds will be administered will be similar to the Connect Oregon program, is how I've been sort of told. So you guys have set up such a wonderful program that other agencies are sort of taking note. So that process will be going through the next few months. And then kind of the project I'm here to talk about is the solar eclipse. I don't know. Yeah. Wish. I'm not. Yeah, it's coming up. So the Regional Solutions team sort of identified that the solar eclipse would be a major event for many regions. I think we have 3 or 4 counties, Wheeler, a little bit of Gillum, Grant, Baker, and Malheur, who are in the path of totality. So we're expecting, as you all know, many visitors to Eastern Oregon. So the team started pulling together those regions here in Eastern Oregon back in last October to start kind of planning and making sure we were prepared for the eclipse. So that included all of the tourism and visitor association folks, county emergency managers, county officials, like county elected leaders, state agencies, so everyone from, all of our state agencies, and also OHA and Oregon Department of Forestry, and also our federal partners, U.S. Forest Service and BLM. So we've been meeting monthly. It's been a really great collaboration. We've identified a lot of areas that folks out here felt we needed resources, and luckily we've been able to sort of help troubleshoot them and really find some ways. So we are excited. We feel prepared for the next few days. I know that there are a lot of sort of emergency operation centers that are being set up in the counties that are in the totality. And the governor did activate the National Guard in preparation, so we'll have National Guard resources in a few counties, and additional ambulances have been able to help serve, because many of these counties have vast areas, but just not a lot of emergency vehicles and personnel to help. So that was a real key that we sort of helped take that to the state and sort of help have resources come back. So, and we are very excited for the ODOT policy of push, pull, drag that we hear is in place to keep roads open. So, we'll see how that goes.
So Central Oregon right now, you
Yes.
can't push, pull, or drag. I mean, it's actually just sit and move. Like, we should actually roll downhill. Let's just push downhill cars. But just kidding, but
Yes.
yeah.
So we'll see. I mean, and I mean, definitely Central Oregon is probably a little bit more impacted, but Eastern Oregon will be quite impacted, and we're, you know, and also another huge thing is to sort of do a lot of PSAs and education about fire prevention and making sure that that's really the number one sort of concern out here is that we're going to have a big wildfire spark. So, so we'll see how it goes, and then we'll be doing sort of aftermath. And this is, you know, we feel just statewide an opportunity to really collaborate and look at best practices and, you know, resiliency efforts for future events, potentially the Cascadia earthquake. So nice. So, and I will turn it over to Ken.
Okay, so the project I'd like to talk about is one that's been before the commission before through some just amendment actions, but it's the Gentura Cutoff Road project. It's an important project for for Malheur and Harney counties. This is a project that requires quite a bit of partnership, and that's why it was an RST project. Looking back through the funding, by the time we fully got this thing put together, it required funding from 9 different entities, you know, in various degrees. So the Federal Lands Access Program brought $2 million to the table. The IOF, approved through the board, commission here, you know, brought $1 million to the table. The legislature in 2016 brought $2 million to the table. ODOT Enhance, we had a project that in the 15-18 STIP that we pulled some money out of it because it wasn't going to be a viable project. So we also in that area, so we went ahead and moved a little bit of money into this project for the tune of about $490,000. Each of the counties are bringing $125,000 to the table. The company, Eagle Pitcher, they're bringing $250,000 to the table. Business Oregon IFA Fund is bringing $315,000. And then Business Oregon Strategic Reserve is bringing $415,000 to the table. So all told, this project's going to be about $6.7 million in total cost. The reason this project's important, Eagle Pitcher, they're a company that mines diatomaceous earth, similar to kitty litter, absorbent material, and they've had a long-standing operation where they're mining the material out near Druzy in Harney County, and then they ship it by truck towards Vail, where they actually process it, package it, and ship it by rail or by truck to their ultimate customers. The current road that leads to the mine from our state highway to the mining operation is about 7.5 miles long. And the condition of that road has deteriorated to the point where the existing 28-foot width doesn't exist anymore. The base has completely failed. The potholes are large enough that semi-trucks are having to dodge these potholes, and you know, it's not safe to really navigate the road for the company. At the same time, the company's had an increase in demand for their product, and they would like to expand production, but with the condition of that road, they're not able to bring more vehicles up there safely because trucks are not maintaining their lane. It's just not a safe road. So, you know, that was the justification for the IOF. You know, they're able to expand this project. It's going to create 23 new jobs. You know, based on what we heard earlier, jobs in Eastern Oregon are very important. So 23 new jobs for Harney and Malheur County is a good investment. It's a high priority for the area. And so we've had a lot of support for this. What's gone on to date is, of course, the IOF agreement's been signed and executed late last year. The bond sale for the legislative dollars occurred this spring, so those funds are available. And now we're working in the design phase. So we've gone through a procurement to get a consultant design firm on board, and the contract has been negotiated. It's currently sitting at DOJ review, and we're looking forward to get moving on this project so that we can be building this in 2018. So that's kind of the Gentura project. It's been a great partnership with multiple agencies. Business Oregon has worked really hard to pull all the firms together and the counties together so that everybody's on the same page, and there's a little bit of ownership for everybody that's involved in this project, and we think it's going to be a real successful project.
it's a good example of that partnership of figuring out, finding a common goal, and then just moving incrementally toward it, figuring out how you can blend and braid and bring those funds together. And I think as we had the earmark conversation, that's how we will have to think about projects, especially in this short run. But it can be done, and I think it's great to see that this is happening. Wonderful.
Thanks.
You betcha.
Chair Paney, Commissioners, Director Garrett, thank you for joining us here in Eastern Oregon. My name is Randy Jones, and I represent DEQ on the Regional Solutions team. So I want to highlight a couple projects that I'm deeply involved with on behalf of the team that is on and have been on our list and pushing forward, and I expect that they will be for some time. I appreciate the earlier comment, Commissioner Simpson, that around what does Eastern Oregon's economy look like if it's to be sustained into the future, and we wrestle with that a lot, that question. So these two projects, I think, are potentially representative of that future economy. The first is in Malheur County. It's about 25 miles south of Vail, and it is prototypic Southeast Oregon sagebrush country, where in the late 1980s, early 1990s, there was a large underground deposit of gold identified. There was a large Canadian company that eventually purchased those claims, and there was 15 to 18 individual claims purchased, one of which was a patented claim over the top of this large ore body. That is located at a depth of 750 to 900 feet. Calico Resources, now wholly owned by a U.S. company, Paramount Nevada Gold, and they've taken over all operations, permitting, and the future of this project. For 5 years now, they have been collecting required data to document existing environmental conditions, ranging from wildlife, certainly sage grouse conditions, to water resources, to wildlife habitat, air quality, to transportation, and so on. They've finished that data collection effort, and now they are incrementally now moving toward assembling all of their state permit applications that they expect to submit first quarter 2018, maybe early second quarter 2018. The significance of this project for the region is that indeed this is a chemical mining process. It's a hard rock underground extraction and then a chemical mining separation of resource from ore in such a way that is really fairly environmentally benign in a series of closed vessels, unlike past practices across the West, even in southwestern Oregon, where our statewide rules were written around chemical mining processes to put a stop to those historic practices in Oregon anyway. This company has proceeded further through those rules and statutes than anyone in Oregon's history. There are wagers across the international mining industry whether or not they're going to get a permit, because Oregon's been closed for a long time. This company represents about 200 jobs for a 2 to 3 year construction period, and 150 jobs long-term over the life of mine, which is 10 to 12 years. And these are the company has expressed numbers around the $85,000 to $90,000 a year jobs. So these are sustainable family wage jobs for sure. The 13 to 15 other targets, by the way, represent the potential that this mine, once an $80 million processing facility is constructed, the operation may last in Oregon as long as 20 to 30 years. So that depreciated value over a longer period, obviously the company is very interested in that. Locally, there will be, it's estimated that there will be about a $13 million annual local economic churn across Vail, Nissa, Ontario, and so on. Highway 2026 out of Ontario toward Vale, and Highway 20 out of Vale, heading somewhat southwest, are the primary state routes leading up to the southbound gravel access to the mine. This will be these segments will be subjected to that heavy mining equipment traffic for a time here over the next few years. So this is a 9-state agency effort, and I can tell you that there are many more experienced people than I am that are watching this and are saying they've never seen such a transparent and open process. So this is a great collaboration, and it's led by Dogami, and I'm helping at the technical review team level, and I'm a lot closer out here than folks in Portland and Salem. So the second project to highlight is a push forward toward forest health, ultimately. And that's the idea of turning our non-commercial diameter trees across largely our public lands into an energy product called torrefied biomass. So the idea is that the cellulosic bonds have energy, those are preserved, and those are processed down into cubes, briquettes that are very, very dense, both physically dense and energy dense, more energy per unit volume than coal. PGE, for instance, at Boardman and their big power plant there, they've made the decision some years ago to stop burning coal as a fuel source by the end of 2020. They have been participating in part in the effort to find a new fuel that's a sustainable fuel, that's a cleaner burning fuel. The National Endowment for Forestry and Communities has been supporting financially an effort through Oregon Torrefaction, a new emerging private sector company, but in partnership with Malheur Lumber and with the Bonneville Environmental Foundation, to look at what it would take in terms of setting up supply chains out of our national forests to feed either markets like PGE Boardman or potentially even Asian markets with a pretty efficient and clean burning fuel source, an industrial fuel source. The result, obviously, and I think obviously, is that our fire threat out on our national forests, which we spend so much money suppressing, those saved monies could be spent otherwise, other ways. Our historic labor force, in large part, still exists in our rural communities that can staff and serve these supply chains. So what's exciting is that as we speak, the Oregon Torrefaction Consortium is working in Prineville to, as a first start, to site a mobile torrefaction reactor to process material. And it may be, and there will be a decision in the next couple weeks, it may be that they would actually start in John Day, simply because of our federal partnering on the Malheur National Forest and the years of infrastructure we've set up through a stewardship contract there, harvesting this same material, generating chips that can be turned into the energy product close to the source, thereby justifying the transportation costs to market. And that's been the trick, is the absence of market and distance to point of service and sale. So there are engineering results that look very promising. The volume is very large and demanding. It is a big question economically, mathematically, and from an infrastructure standpoint, how we transport such great volumes. And it likely is not going to be limited to surface transport. Indeed, especially if an Asian market is viable, the Columbia River, mentioned earlier, will be a key artery getting to, say, Clatskanie and the public dollars we've invested at Port Westward. The next few years will tell the tale as to whether this is an emerging industry in Oregon and across the West, frankly. Thank you.
So no pushback on the long-term sustainability contracts for product, or is that?
I interact a lot with the federal forest supervisors. Some are more open to the stewardship contracting framework than others, but most understand that it is relatively simple, it's relatively efficient, and I think eyes will be on Iron Triangle and their stewardship contract in John Day here coming up.
So I have to say, I've never heard DEQ advocate for gold mining. That is pretty cool. I need to talk to you some more, but that is
Or wood burning.
or wood burning. And I made a comment as you were talking about this. I felt like Shark Tank, that we're up here like Shark Tank, but very cool projects that you're talking about. So thank you very much.
So we can have a conversation offline about air quality benefits. Yes, we can.
Chair Beatty, members of the commission, Director Garrett. My name is Scott Fairley. I think last time I spoke with you, I was the Regional Solutions Coordinator. However, I wanted a job that was closer to the money, and ODOT wasn't hiring, so I'm now the Southeast Regional Development Officer for Business Oregon, covering Grant, Hardin, and Malheur County. So it's a pleasure to speak with you all again this evening. The project I want to talk with you about is not yet a Regional Solutions project, but it is one that we anticipate will become a Regional Solutions project. And that would be the Treasure Valley Intermodal Facility, which I'm sure you're all familiar with, that was funded in the last transportation bill that was recently approved. So the genesis of this project came actually many, many years ago, I'm not sure, probably 10 years ago or longer, from the onion growers in the Treasure Valley. Most of their market for onions is on the East Coast, Chicago and New York, and they were spending thousands of dollars per truckload to get onions east. So they did some investigation, and they found they could use the RailX facility up on the Wallula at the Port of Port of Walla Walla on the Columbia River. Cost about $600 to $900 per truckload to get onions up there, only for those very same onions to go back through the Treasure Valley on the next day on a RailX car heading east. So as you can imagine, that caused a little consternation amongst growers down there. It puts them at a competitive disadvantage. So they talked internally amongst themselves, and that ultimately ended in a conversation by Malheur County Economic Development and our outreach to RailX to come look at Malheur County and see whether it would be a good fit for a similar kind of facility. So RailX officials came out about a year ago to the county. They looked at several sites. They talked to onion growers. They talked to other folks, other potential shippers. And their kind of take-home message was, we think there is an opportunity for a facility here, which kind of got to the placement of that proposed facility in the bill. So where we are now in all this, is, you may know, but the county has formed a 501c4 organization to kind of govern this proposed facility. They are now calling themselves the Malheur County Development Corporation. They have appointed 7 board members. There's representing a lot of onion growers, other people from agriculture, people with finance background, and local government are represented on the board. They are in the process currently, well, I should say they have adopted bylaws and articles of incorporation. They are in the process now of putting together a draft plan, which I believe they want to at least begin to talk with you at your next meeting about what that plan looks like, on how money for the facility would be spent, where and when to, that with your approval would release funding for some preliminary engineering and eventual construction of the transload facility. So the outcome of all this, once it finally gets built, I think, the win is there's going to be 8,000 fewer trucks vying Oregon's highways between the Treasure Valley and the Wallula facility, the RailX facility. We'll also have, for Malheur County, it's a tremendous economic development opportunity. I mean, it's much akin to the opportunity the Port of Morrow has provided to Morrow County, and there's a lot of excitement by folks down there, and as well as people working in economic development. They have identified 5 sites. The folks, RailX was bought out by Union Pacific. They're coming to Malheur County later this month to look at sites. And so by the end of August, the board should have a pretty clear indication of the site they're looking for. And Business Oregon has allocated some funding to hold that site until the funding outlined in the transportation package can be released. So from my perspective, I'm new with Business Oregon. I'm very excited. This is a tremendous opportunity for the region, honestly. And I think it's a great opportunity, again, to partner with Department of Transportation, Ken, and other staff, and really all of us up here to help kind of coordinate on the technical and financial piece of this project and really help bring it in quickly and expeditiously so that the region really realizes the benefits we think it has the potential to bring. The next project I want to talk about, and does anyone have any questions on the transload facility? I'm sure you're all very well versed with that.
It's exciting, and I'm looking
really
forward
exciting.
to more as it goes forward.
Yeah,
So
no, it's very exciting. Thank you. The last one I want to talk about is really about as far away from a regional solutions project as you could come, but I just really like it, so I want to talk about it. And that is an opportunity that came to Burns. And actually, not only was there no need for interagency collaboration, there's really no need for collaboration at all. They came to Burns and they said, look, we want to locate here, and if we can't do it, we're not going anywhere. And that is, of all things, a FedEx distribution facility, which is locating at some industrial land in Hines. They're going to start off kind of modestly with, 4 to 6 employees, but they anticipate branching out to 12. 1 to 2 trucks a day initially, branching from there. But the most interesting part of this project is, I asked the judge, I said, that's interesting, a distribution center in Hines, what are they distributing? It'd be interesting to know that. And I don't remember what he called it, but it's essentially an online sales distribution center. So I would anticipate coming back to you next year requesting funds to add a couple lanes to Highway 20, because I think this could really grow and be a significant opportunity for Burns as well. So thank you for your time this evening. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Hello, Chair Boehne, Commissioners, Director Garrett, Melissa Drugi, Lead Regional Development Officer with Business Oregon, and I serve Umatilla, Morrow, and Gillum and Wheeler counties only. We don't have to go on and on and on, right? I'm the happiest of the 3 of us up here. Today I'm going to talk about the data center activity occurring in Umatilla County. And so most recently, the Regional Solutions team early this year worked on land use issues around the 2 properties that the data center company was looking at in Umatilla County. The first one is located near Westland Road, which is, it's actually off the exit of Westland Road. They're off of I-84. And they required a zone change, and we were successful in helping them kind of go through what processes they needed to get through, what they were going to be doing with the county, and making that zone change, and that was approved. And then they went through a similar situation with their City of Umatilla property as well. So we as a team met with them, talked about that, kind of guided them in the fact that land use was first, and then kind of said, what's next? And so as we're moving through with this project, we'll be looking at some transportation developments that are both related to their site for them specifically, but also some public road improvements that'll be needed on both sites. So both the ODOT representatives and myself have met with the city and the county to talk about those projects. It looks as though we're probably going to see some IOFs. I do have, for Umatilla County, kind of a draft and some estimated costs. It looks like it's about a $600,000 project, so you'll see me in the future. But I think for these are exciting for us in that these jobs are, they say, well, they don't create a lot of jobs for the investment they make, but in Eastern Oregon, you're looking at initially starting at each site 40 jobs that have a starting wage of about $68,000. that's a huge impact to Eastern Oregon. And we just recently finished a workforce training center in the Port of Morrow with Blue Mountain Community College. And this particular data center was instrumental in helping develop the curriculum for that training. And they also are volunteering instruction for that training program. So there's a real collaboration between the community and this company. And it just seems that as we move forward in developing these, that you also have to look at the fact that there's a huge impact of indirect jobs related to the construction and the security. They contract their security out, but even in some of the other past developments, the construction jobs have stayed on for years because they build them one building at a time and continue to go. So we're seeing this as a really great opportunity for some additional job creation and great starting wages for Umatilla County. The other project that I just want to touch a little bit on, because I know we're running up against time, but I do want to mention the Umatilla Army Depot from the standpoint that I just want to make sure that you have an update on land transition from the federal government to the two entities. First, the Columbia Development Authority, which really will be managing the piece that's the industrial piece in Umatilla County mostly, and they're projecting this year for December 1st of 2017. On a more exciting note, we may be hearing that the National Guard piece could transfer as early as the end of this month or the beginning of next month. So they're going to transfer the National Guard piece hopefully soon. And of course, I'm sure you're familiar with the $7 million that's part of the House Bill 2017 for the access road. So, thank you.
All right, good afternoon. I'm Brian McDowell, Regional Development Officer with Business Oregon. I actually cover this region, Region 11, Baker, Union, and Wallowa counties. Excuse me. Project I wanted to talk about was Baum Industrial Park. That's Bravo Alpha Uniform Mike. So Baum, not the other bomb. So, I'll keep this kind of brief because I think it's I'm between us and drinks, right? So, yes. So Baum Industrial Park is located in La Grande. It's a 60-acre industrial site that's been worked on for a little while now. It got funding from the regional solutions team last round for, was it 750, I think, or $1 million?
1.8.
Or, oh, okay. Yeah, a pretty significant amount of funding to finish up, somewhere between, I think it was 1.2 and 1.8 million from regional solutions. So Commissioner Donna Beverage from Union County has been instrumental in kind of picking that up recently and really kind of getting it moving forward. So we're at the point now where the site is shovel ready. It can cover heavy industrial, food processing, general manufacturing, regular manufacturing, shipping and storage, and then warehouse and distribution. So it's on 60 acres, and at least in Union County, I believe that's the largest industrial park, and there's a big shortage of sites that are ready to go that can be marketed or be improved further within, let's say, 180 days. So if somebody wants to come in and they need something done with the infrastructure that isn't there yet, it can be done pretty rapidly. So pretty big win there. As far as transportation's concerned and why it's important is there's very few of these sites that have this access. So the airport is about 173 miles away from the park. The main one, the regional airport in Pendleton, is 58 miles. The interstate is 4 miles. The highway is half a mile. And then rail line is 0.2 miles. So, and then the marine port is 96 there in Umatilla. So part of the challenge with transportation was how do we get the last 1.2 miles there of roads so that they can get to all these other transportation avenues and make it much more attractive. So that was just finishing up this week and last week, I believe. This site should be a pretty promising and big site for Union. And then just in the broader perspective, I think there's one other industrial site in Union. There's one site, at least one site, Elkhorn View in Baker County, and then working with Mayor Sands, we may have a very small industrial park in Joseph that we can work on that's 6 acres. But in terms of the whole region, this would definitely be a huge plus, and to have the transportation now getting completed, it should help tremendously. So, but it took a huge team effort. So, anyway, so that's in short, but I can answer any questions.
Is the Baum Industrial Park owned by the county?
Yes.
And how, tell me again how big it is?
60 acres.
60 acres?
60.
Have there been industry snooping around saying, you know, we continue to have conversations? Have you had any distraction?
From our recruiting folks, lightly, but it's part of the issue has been, is it really shovel ready? Does it have broadband capability and broadband at the level that we need it? And we just confirmed literally last week that it does and can. We were working with a couple of the providers and just confirming, hey, if somebody came in here and needed a significant different, you know, a level of broadband, can that be done? And the answer was yes. So I think we'll get a lot more inquiries because we can be much more proactive in marketing it and working with the county to market it now that we know everything's a go.
What's impressive to me is that we also heard about capacity earlier, and for smaller counties and communities to be able to have this level of detailed surgical strikes in terms of working to really figure out the economic vitality to this part of the state is just critical to the success. And it's great to see, you know, the partnership and everyone. It's you know, you blur lines here, and that's a good thing because we're serving the same people all across the state. So how do we make sure that all boats are rising? I love the interaction with Blue Mountain, the community college, and that workforce development. And I mean, I'm just hearing all the pieces that you hope happen in a community, and then that extra hand to make sure that a small community can actually fulfill that and get it happening. So really thrilled to hear about the projects. Do we have particular comments or questions?
Sounds like pretty darned exciting. Really.
Yeah, it's a great way to end the day. So I think we will go ahead and recess until tomorrow. Thank you for your hard work. Great to see you, and I hope you can join us for dinner.